you get to sections and you're like, that is not a manicured berm. That's a gnarly off camber rooty bit. And that's when things shake out. You're like, here we go. And I really hope that downhill can keep that, because these manicured bike parks, who cares what I think, but I don't think they bring out the best in a rider. You know, the riders can do so much more.
This episode of The Ride Companion is brought to you by Crankworx.
It's race season.
That's right, Davey. Crankworx Rotorua returns March 16th to 24th, celebrating 10 years of Crankworx Rotorua. Since then, it's played host to some of the most memorable moments in Crankworx history and is now referred to as the soul of Crankworx. So, what can we expect from Crankworx Rotorua 2024, and how can we watch and play along?
Well, Ollie, the RockShox Tanifar DH will take place on March the 18th, and the event is free to spectate. Hey, this could be a little teaser into who's on form for 2024. Mick Hanna took the W last year ahead of Bas van Steenbergen, Blenky, and the UK's very own Tiger King, Bernard Kerr. Of course, you'll have Rob Warner on the commentary too.
The festival of all things biking continues at Skyline Rotorua, March 20th to 24th, with the Maxis Slopestyle in memory of Magaza taking place on Sunday, March the 24th. The big question is, can anybody stop Amelia Hansen? Can recent guest Tom Eisted improve on his third place at Joyride? And can Max Fredriksson slide onto that podium?
Mate, for 2024, there's also equal prize money across the SWC women's and SWC men's categories, with more than 500,000 Canadian dollars to be given out during the 2024 Crankworx World Tour and SWC. Similarly, the Triple Crown of Slopestyle will be rewarded to any rider who wins 3 Crankworx Slopestyle events in a single season, with a value of $25,000 per crown. Further to that, winners in both men's and women's categories of Red Bull Joyride at Crankworx Whistler are granted lifetime entry to Crankworx Slopestyle events. Ollie, Rotorua is a long way, mate, but I really want to watch and play along. How do I do it?
Well, if you can't make it to the festival itself, catch all the action live on Red Bull TV, or follow at Crankworx Rotorua and at Crankworx on Instagram for course previews, daily highlights and photo recaps of all the best action daily from Crankworx Rotorua.
Don't forget, if you want to take your fandom to the next level and have some horses in the events, you can also head to theracecompanion.com and play our fantasy downhill and slopestyle games, where you could be in with a chance of winning some epic prizes.
That's right. If you're looking to get amongst the action, festival passes are still available for purchase at crankworx.com/Rotorua.
Hey, love to be at the head of the game. Crankworx Cairns tickets are also now on sale.
Mate, hype for it. Miss something or need some more info? Crankworx.com has everything you need.
Now let's get back into the episode.
How do we do an intro? What intro should we do? Should we do your new title?
You can do whatever you want to say.
What would be your new title, though? Because there's been some certain speculation.
There has been certain speculation. I'm performance manager. One of my roles is as performance manager for Norco Factory.
This is going to sound... Dude, this is an intro. All right, okay, everyone. Welcome, the new performance manager.
The problem is you're not going to cut any of this.
No,
I know what you're like.
Listen.
You're literally...
Sure.
We're in now.
Hey,
Yeah,
good friend Alan Milway.
We're in.
Thanks, mate. Performance manager sounds dry, dude, doesn't it? You know what I mean? That's tough, right?
I think I'm accused of being quite dry, so it probably fits me quite well.
You're much more than performance. I guess performance manager is
very
also very
corporate
cool.
title.
It's just corporate.
Corporate.
Corporate?
That's a good one. You can have that. Corporate. It's cool and it's corporate.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
You can have that for free.
Yeah, I feel like you do much more. That title
yeah.
is too. I don't know.
Well, I'm a coach.
That way,
That's what that's what I see myself as. But the whole idea of coaching for me is helping that athlete on the racetrack. So it's all the things around it. It's not just like one part of it. Like we're talking about the gym and all the rest of it. That's fine, but it's if you don't get any better on the bike, these guys and girls, they're like, well, why am I doing it? It's all got to be around the bike.
Yeah.
See, I think this is. I reckon This is so interesting.
Yeah, it's going to be a banger, this one, isn't it?
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right, okay. So just as a first, this is a ridiculous first question, quite frankly, and we haven't done a proper introduction, but whatever. We're
worried about what it's going to be, don't we?
Yeah. How much? No. Right. So, what percentage out of coach would you say is each individual point?
Ooh.
For instance,
Yeah.
fitness,
Yeah.
mind,
Yeah.
Strength,
nutrition, training.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can probably split it
Okay.
down to
So I'll give you the really boring
Skill.
answer first. It depends.
Yeah.
And it depends on the individual. So there'll be some athletes where you can see once you get to know them, God, they're really good at that. They've got that bit dialed. We need to help this bit. So my role with that athlete might be more, in the gym, and in the way it could be more technique based. So if you've got someone who's super in tune with their body, they know that they want to hit a certain number because it makes them feel good in the gym. So let's just be arbitrary, bench press. If you hit 100 kilo bench, you're a happy man. Okay, you can go off to the next World Cup stoked. I'm feeling strong. If I know that, that's not a physical, that's a psychological improvement. Do you see what I mean?
Man, yeah.
So I'm like, I'll feed that. Not from the fit. I don't care whether you've got 100 kilo bench press or not.
Yeah.
But if you walk out of that gym and get on that plane to go to Mont St. Anne and you feel like King Kong, hey, that's the job I'm trying to do. So you have to try and understand the athlete to say what is going to feed them the most. So some of them, it'll be about peak power outputs. Some of them, it'll be about a number in a gym. Some of it will be about an FTP or a threshold number. Some of them, it'll be about just purely test track numbers on a stopwatch versus someone else. And so you're just trying to, understand the big picture, I think is probably the best way to put it.
So it's completely fluid, and it just changes between person and even time.
Yeah, you've got like if you think of it as like a pie, and you've got all these different slices that make up the perfect downhiller. Some of them they've got all these bits nailed, and there's one little bit, I'm not going to be chatting with Greg or Danny or Charlie or any of those boys about a basic technical improvement in their riding.
Yeah.
But I might be saying to them on the track, have you not thought about trying to do this? Because they're so in the zone, about all these other things they've got going on. So you're trying to just enlighten them on something you've seen. Is it going to help them? And if you think it is, you better be damn sure of yourself, to suggest it. But at the same time, you want it to be helpful. So I think my role was, I was chatting about nutrition to Charlie this morning. He phoned me up and he had a query. I wouldn't often do that with Charlie, but he wanted to talk about it. Right, how about this? How about that? Do you see what I mean? So you've just got to be available for the athlete so they can feel they can call you or talk to you about something that will help them.
Okay. I really want to understand how you ended up at this point, which I know is kind of, it's a very podcasty, quite a boring thing, but I'd love to hear like a bit of the story, the arc of your career and how you ended up as performance coach.
Professional races. Yeah.
For what's the your team that your performance?
Norco. Well, so I'm working for Norco at the
so
the
who's
World
on your
Cups.
team?
So you've got the Norco riders. You've got Greg. You've got Gracie. You've got Lucas Cruz, and you've got Kirk McDowell, who's one of their engineers, who's also going to be sort of very much involved in that team process. So at the World Cups, they will be my focus, and behind them, there's an incredible engineering team as well.
Yeah.
And that's really exciting for me. That's something that I've really wanted to get stuck into for years. I've got a lot of thoughts on like the engineering side and like the material side and just how they put the bike together. And although it's not my expertise, that's my interest. So when you've got a back staff team or a backroom team who are feeding the factory team like that, that's going to be really cool.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So to frame what your question, you're literally working with the greatest of all time. We can all say Greg is the greatest of all time.
Believe it's the GOAT.
He's the boy, isn't he?
Yeah. How have you got there? Where did this start?
Where did it start? Because I actually, sorry to interrupt, I was really surprised before you turned up today. Ollie was telling me you used to take him to races and you had this like...
Yeah, the crew.
Yeah. You actually have a really long history
long
together, which is really nice. So.
Well, and it's all round here. It's quite nice to be back down in this neck of the woods, driving past my old school and what have you. So basically, the only reason I got out of bed in the mornings was to play sport.
Right.
So I was all about football athletics, and without getting too deep into it, I think my dad was in the army. He was an officer in the army. And because of that, we were booted off to boarding school. And if you're an army child in a posh school, your dad hasn't got a load of money. You ain't going to compete with those boys and girls on a financial standpoint. They've all got big houses and nice cars, and you're at this school and you're thinking, how am I going to find my place here? And I wasn't that academic. So, and back then at school, you were graded, weren't you? Like top of the class, quite literally, first, second, third, right. Milway's 7th in French and 9th in maths and whatever. So I was never, that's, you know, you sort of have to think, well, how am I going to find my pecking order?
Man, I've never thought about grading. That's brutal, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely brutal.
I'm not sure they do it anymore.
No.
But when you think,
insane. You got graded. Yeah, I don't think I ever got graded.
and so between two of the year groups, between year 1 and year 2 at my school, there was a class called lower remove. And if you weren't in the top 15, you had to do another year with the dummies to get up to standard. So basically I felt as though, how am I going to find my place? And I can't compete with you financially. I can't compete with you intellectually, but I'm going to be faster than you. I'm going to be better at football than you. And that was my drive. Right. So I ended up being captain of the school teams, and I won all the races at sports day and put forward to various sporting county level stuff.
Right.
And that was my drive. But when I got to secondary school, I was having real problems with my knee. So I had quite a lot of recurring knee injuries from bowling and cricket and from athletics.
So you did all the sports?
Yeah, did absolutely everything, literally. And that's all I wanted to do was we had school sports day, and I used to not be able to eat for 2 days before school sports day because I was that nervous. I was like, I want to smoke everyone here. And I took it really seriously, and I trained really hard, and that was all I wanted to do. And used to get a silver spoon for winning a race. Yeah. And in my mum's house, it's just silver spoons.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah. And that was my, I was like, right, this is what I want to do. But then when I sort of hit puberty and got 13, 14, I was getting these knee problems. And the school, this was at Whitley, they took me to various specialists, which is unbelievable when you think about it. The school were doing that.
Yeah.
And one of the doctors sat me down and said, look, football's just not going to be the one. Athletics isn't going to be the one. You need to cycle or swim. And we had a swimming pool at school. And I know we were joking about it earlier, but they made you wear Speedos. And when you're 13, 14, skinny little kid, you're like, oh, God. And
you're like, all right, then, if you must.
If you want to. And I literally was like, you know what? I'd ridden bikes, but never mountain bikes. And I was like, well, bikes got to be a thing. And I just literally went into WH Smith and bought a magazine. And it was a really weird experience, honestly. I opened it up and I was like, this is me. And it wasn't an ambition. It was like, I'm home. I opened it up and I was like, here we go. This is what I've been waiting for.
Knowing what you know now about, strength, coach.
So fitness. Ironic, isn't it?
Yeah, but also, why did that guy say that? Did he have actually any evidence to back that up?
This is it. I wish I knew, because if you think about all, if I can be involved with Gee Athertons rehab from breaking with these horrific injuries and he can get back on a bike, how can some kid at 13, 14 with a bit of a sore knee not be able to continue playing? It's astonishing, but serendipitous, I guess you'd say. If I was, then maybe I'd be a half decent footballer, or maybe I wouldn't. But I just fell into it and got into racing. My parents weren't interested at all in it, which was, I guess, pretty disappointing when you look back as a parent.
Racing what?
Mountain bikes. They had literally, first race was at Longmoor.
Yeah, dude. Same with me. Yeah. Same race. Yeah. Not same race, but.
Turn up. And Longmoor's there's no hill really, is there? You know what I mean?
How dare you? It's insane when you go back and you try and find the track we used to race down. It's honestly, it's mind blowing.
I think I've been down it with you.
Yeah, you probably, you have. You actually have.
At the end of it.
Yes,
because
he's ridden Longmoor.
Because of all the rocks.
Yeah. You've had a full tour. Yeah, you have.
Yeah. So that was my first ever race. And I remember pulling up and my dad had bought the paper on the way and he was like, have a good day. And I was like, that's it then. So I literally came across this field and animal orange truck was there, and you see the bike. And I'd bought a set of Judy downhill forks, but the Marzocchi bombers were the ones, because as you rode across the field, the bombers were going brrr, and I had elastomers, and because it was cold, the elastomers wouldn't work, would they? So like they just wouldn't move, and I was like, oh man, I've spent my money on the wrong fork here.
Bloody hell.
I
love the thought of it back then. It felt so new and exciting and simple, didn't it?
Yeah.
It was like there was, I don't know, there was like people, there was like different crews of people on different bikes. Like I always remember the LTS.
Yeah.
Like the sound of it,
That's
that elastomer.
That's it. And the Tioga disc drive like was still just sort of going out then, but it had like this it's like a drum when it came past you, that reverberation.
Yeah.
And Dave Hemming on his P7 or whatever.
Yeah.
All of that. So, and I was like, I just felt at home. I was like, oh, it's amazing. And I was like really mid-pack, but I did get better. I eventually won Longmore as a junior. So I got, you know what I mean? I was I got better, and there was no way I could ever see myself making a living at it. I wasn't good enough, but I went to university in Birmingham and studied sports science. And then everything, again, it just felt so normal. So you'd have a lesson or a lecture on something, and all I was doing is like relating it to the mountain bikes. Oh, I see how that would help. Oh, I see how that would help. And then like the psychology lectures were fascinating. I can see exactly how that would help. So everything I was just relating to the bikes.
Right. There was already a bit of a goal there then to turn.
No, not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. It was just that because it was what I loved, it helped me learn. I could relate what I was learning. It felt sensible.
Did you have an idea what you wanted to do as a career though at that point?
No. Right. And I graduated, and we went to, I used to go to Morzine a lot. I used to go every summer, all summer to Morzine. And I remember as I was graduating, me and a friend of mine were like, let's go to Morzine all summer. Let's just hire the biggest place we can and try and get people in for like 100 quid a week and see if we can cover our costs. And that just took off. So that ended up being almost a career. But when I came back after the first summer, I bumped into Paul Hunt from the Pedal Hounds, and we were chatting, and him and me and a few friends were just chatting, and he said, look, the motocross boys really need fitness coaching. They spend all their money on the bikes. They've got really poor fitness.
I didn't know this. So that's how you got in.
That's how I got into it.
Wow, there you go. So who was first?
I ended up working with basically the top 7 British Championship riders at British Championship Motocross. I literally took out, after that conversation with Paul Hunt, Trials and Motocross News was a big thing. I literally took out an advert in Trials and Motocross News like the next day or the same day. I just wrote the advert, and then I got phone calls, and that led to writing an article for Dirt Bike Rider on arm pump.
Oh wow.
Because I was getting really fed up with people moaning about arm pump all the time, and they thought it was this mystical thing in their head.
Don't talk about needles like that. He's not here to
He's not here to defend himself. So I was like, look, it's a physical manifestation. Obviously there's a psychological input to it and the rest of it. But I wrote this article about it, and then they published that, and then they wanted a monthly article, and then I got a call off Roy Emberson, who was like, he owned the Yamaha team at the time, and then I coached his riders, and then it just grew and grew and grew. And then off the back of one of those articles, I got a very polite email from Mr. George Atherton, literally and he knew, because I knew him, and Rach had stayed, and I knew them, but not very well. And so he was like the first big step, I guess, into working with downhillers. So
what British motor guys did you work with?
Like Jordan Rose, Brad Anderson,
Stephen Sword at that point, was he around?
Yeah, Swordy was around. I went to Stephen Sword's house to interview him for Dirt Bike Rider.
There you go.
And he was such a nice guy. Yeah, I've got to know like those guys.
Yeah.
I still work with some of them, like Jamie Carpenter I work with, who's just done Hawkston International.
Okay.
But yeah.
Did you have any previous motocross background or anything? So it was all like new to you. And
yeah, it was all new.
That's good though.
But in a way, I was very much like the fitness guy, because they've all had motocross skills coaches.
Yeah.
And that was a big thing for them. They'd have the motocross skills coach. They'd have a motorcycle where they'd spend $3,000 on an engine rebuild to make it a bit faster. And then they'd get off the bike and they'd just be like dead.
It's interesting. Skills coaching isn't as much of a thing in mountain biking, is it?
It's fascinating. It's such an untapped area.
You feel it is,
Massive.
yeah. So you feel like there's some time to be knocked out of.
Well, just think, you're a big basketball guy. Can you imagine like Michael Jordan? He finishes his game and his coach is like, right, we'll see you next week.
Top work, mate.
Yeah, well done. See you again next week. Or
No, I agree.
if you think about any sport, the top level athletes will all have really good structured guided coaching.
Yeah.
And mountain biking, it's like you're almost just sending them off with their mates and going, well, ride as fast as you can with your buddies and see if that makes you go any faster.
It's difficult though, isn't it? Because on a moto track, you can just lap and lap and lap, and you can literally see a section over and over again. Yeah. And on mountain bike, it's much harder on a mountain bike to like sort of like control that section and work out the best way of doing it. I feel like it's a more nuanced.
But I don't think it's about trying to do that section better. I think you need to take it back a level. I think it's about raw technical skills input. So you're trying to understand how to be more stable on a bike, understand what happens when your body position goes wrong, what happens if you weight something differently, what happens if you brake in this way, and that will translate. So you can constrain a certain thing to help you. Oh, okay. So I remember seeing, you would have done these messing around with Bren where you were trying to hit a berm and then you'd go a bit further up, hit a berm, go a bit further up.
Yeah, Death Grip Challenge.
You're trying to do that. So that's like a safe way to understand, right, what is the limit? And the interesting thing is, if you were to analyse that...
Didn't feel safe.
What is the limit?
With you.
You know what I mean?
I do. I completely
That's almost
get
like
it.
a lap, like you were saying, of a motor track.
Yeah.
Yes. The session.
Yeah, just session
in
stuff.
something.
And I wonder whether that's why British riders have got such a good history, because we session stuff, especially when there were... I'm not sure nowadays it's so relevant, but back in the day when there wasn't this uplifted bike park, all you could do was, let's do this one bit, push back up, try it again. And then you'd see people doing it. So you'd have this like technical model come past you. Right, I'm going to try and do that. Right, he's done that, let's try that. So it's sort of by osmosis, really. You probably don't realise it's happening.
Yeah.
It is mega interesting when you think in the over all of the World Cups, we've had these like dominant figures, and it's like where they actually, you'd think it would just be Whistler, Morzine, you know what I mean? Like where their hometowns are. And instead you've got, you know, like the Athertons from Devon or whatever, and like Bernard at the minute in P6, he's from here, like 30-second hills, Longmoor, you know what I mean?
Exactly.
But
is that not the nurture as opposed to the nature? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
It's
I agree.
Like that crude.
It's like a wave pool.
Yeah.
That's what it's like. It's
exactly that. Exactly that.
So, but how weird is that?
But then I don't think it is weird. I think it's perfectly normal, because if you haven't got a lot of mates and you're riding these big gnarly tracks, you're not knowing how to get any better at it.
Yeah.
It's only if you've got the support at those places. These, you know, like Loris and Bruni and Vulio, and I think there's
that's mega interesting. That I know what you're
Adrian Daly. They're all from like a real small region.
It's a bicycle club, isn't it?
Exactly.
I'd love to find out more about it. Warner mentioned it, and I was like, he gave me that list, and I was just like,
it's incredible, isn't it?
And the trails that I rode near there, so bad. I don't understand. There's like zero. Doug, you were there, weren't you? He's asleep.
Switched off, he's zoned.
Yeah, he zoned out. But yeah, we were there together. I was just talking about the mountain bike club that Vergier and everyone's from above Nice. And like the trails were tough, weren't they? Yeah,
and
they
the
weren't
secret
like
there is they're
stuff.
just riding together all the time, constant analysis.
I guess,
constant trying to beat each other.
It's a perfect example of like nurture over nature, I would say, because the riding just wasn't fun.
Yeah,
it's not. I'm sure there is fun riding there, and I only sampled a tiny bit of it, but it's not like a big loamy soft hill. That's what I imagine when I think of fun riding.
Yeah, exactly that. And that's where I think there's a generation who've come up with only riding downhill bikes. Like if your first bike is a downhill bike on a downhill track where there are these big man-made berms with all the support you could ever want, and then a really big jump, you get really good at doing that. You know, you follow people down that, but you turn up at a World Cup and you get to sections and you're like, that is not a manicured berm, that's a gnarly off camber rooty bit, and that's when things shake out. You're like, here we go. And I really hope that downhill can keep that, because these manicured bike parks, who cares what I think, but I don't think they bring out the best in a rider. You know, the riders can do so much more. When you follow these boys down, like, where were we? Lenzerheide. After practice, we're on the e-bikes and we rode up one of the fire roads, and I was with Danny and his teammate at the time, and he was like, oh, there's a Loma down here, let's go down here. It was unbelievable. I was like, I wish people could see what you've just done here. You know, he'd like hit this off camber and Danny would just clear the entire bank, land in death, and then just go. And there was me like trying to keep both feet on as I was going off cross camber. And I was like, but 20 feet that way, it's just concrete berms. Like people want to, this is what you want to see.
Yeah, that's what they want to see.
I've got to say, I think it becomes apparent when you see old footage and it just still seems relevant.
Yeah.
It's like you still watch it and you're like, God, that makes me want to.
it.
I'm watching Sam Hill ride. I want to go riding
do
now.
that. Yeah, and that those bits on the track are still there. They are, you know, it reminds me when we were in Maribor together.
Oh, I wanted to bring it up. That was actually going to be in my intro. I've really lost control of this intro.
Is this still it?
Yeah, let's just say, yeah, it's still an intro. Yeah. That honestly, to this day, that's the best trail I reckon.
Oh, really?
I don't know if it was just the day and how good our day was.
I'm really glad you said that, because that was like an after work ride basically. We're finished and then
We heard a rumour.
World Cup.
Yeah, it was at a World Cup, and in Maribor there's accommodation at the bottom of the hill and there's accommodation at the top. And where we were staying at the top, literally you go out the back door and it's just a trail that runs all the way down to the bottom. But there was a good crew of us and the weather was amazing and it was loamy, and like we rode it maybe 3 times or something like that, and each time I was like, oh, this is going a bit quicker here, and there was some gaps to be had, and it was just brilliant.
Honestly,
it's that sort of buzz that if you're a professional downhill racer and you have that on the track, how good is the racing going to be?
Are you getting that vibe from racers that you work with, that some of the tracks are a bit
I think
not inspiring?
Yeah,
That's the
I
thing.
would. And also the volume of training, controversially, I think is too much. I think they get too much time on the track. So the track goes through this sweet spot where they come down, like Andorra would be a really good example. So Andorra, you had G was back. So there was G, Ronan, Charlie and Colby doing freight trains. And they were giggling. I remember being trackside going, this is those boys are having the most fun.
yeah.
And I was so happy for them all. And they come down and they were laughing, they were joking. And I was like, they now need to go up and have a race run. It just felt like, let's just get racing.
Yeah.
But then if the practice goes on for too long, the track breaks down, the berms go, the ruts go. And it can sometimes get to this point where the track, it's like if you see a motocross track after the final 450 moto, you're like, oh my God, it's got axle deep ruts in it and stuff. So I'm not saying that's all the time. And bear in mind, I'm not the racer. I think the racers have to be given a lot of control over those decisions. I think they're the ones that should be
I've never really thought of it like
canvassed.
that. Like you say, the comparison with Moto is over a weekend, even at Hawkstone International or something, they'll go and groom the track. So you almost come back to where you started. But with downhill, it's constantly getting worse over the weekend.
Well, I've talked about it before, my thoughts on it, and I always feel, I'm really glad you said it, because I always feel dodgy like bringing it up, because it's like exactly what you said as well. Who cares what you think? But actually, your thoughts as a fan, and also your thoughts are as a fan, and also someone who's been at all of the races for so long.
Yeah.
And I think actually, I do think that there's not as much in just higher average speed. I think that it's lost something, making everything a bit more.
I agree. Yeah, exactly. And also I like the idea that, so Léger would be a good example of this. So Léger has a really easy first split. There's nothing in the first split. Then the second split is really long. There's loads of corners, loads of line options. And then you've got third split and fourth split. The interesting thing is everything happens in split 2. And so we're all scratching our heads going, where's he made 3 seconds in split 2? Because there's so much of it. And I quite like that. I don't want us to be able to go, well, actually, it's because he did this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that you can get too in depth with it. And I like the idea that, you know, Greg or Charlie or Ronan or whoever's going, should I go inside or outside? Which is a better line here? I'm still not sure. What's developing? Can you give me a radio up from the bottom and let me know what you think is best? How cool is that?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I think. When I talk smack on modern downhill tracks, it's not that I don't like the super fast motorway sections. I think that's really cool. But I like variants, and I think that's that track that we rode. It had bits that you were going so quick, and then you had to check up for bits, slow down, drop into super steep bits, then back into flowy bits, and like that's, I think, the best Like the variance is good.
Yeah, it's got everything. And then there'll be one bit where I'd see, say you would do a gap or something, and I'm like, oh, I don't fancy that. And then you get further away, and then it would slow up, and I'm like, I might be able to catch up with him here. And you'd imagine that from a rider's perspective, I'm not so good at this bit, but I'm better at that bit.
Yeah,
I'll roll the dice
more
on this.
opportunity, not just good at one thing.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
That opportunity. And I think there is the option to design that into the track. I do wonder whether a few years ago, Leo Gang want the people to turn up to Leo Gang. That's why they're putting the World Cup on. But maybe they want to be, the guys want to ride the World Cup track.
Yeah.
But honestly, I can't imagine anyone turning up who's not a very high level downhill racer who wants to go and ride that downhill track.
No, I agree. I don't know about
You know what I mean?
part of the market. I don't really know.
Exactly. I can't, surely you turn up to Leogang because it's got 15 trails. It's got a really nice cafe at the bottom. The uplift's brilliant. It's had a World Cup here. We can check out this section.
Yeah.
Because you can still check it all out. When you see in Leogang, you've got this really fast straight and it's like they jump into a berm, and to witness that in person, like, is phenomenal. And to see where you would take off and you would land in this wooden berm.
What wooden catch, but
that's really cool. But I don't want to try that.
You
know what I mean?
I tell you what, they'd get me booking a flight if they had loam cannons. Like the snow, like the snow ones. Imagine they had loam cannons, dude, and they just restock the forest.
And isn't that
Loam
ironic
cannon.
that you'd have the option if you're more interested to go and ride the Plenty if you hear there's a new single track.
Yeah.
There's this new single track that's just coming out. So
It says something, doesn't it? You're quite right. It does say something, because it's not like anyone's like, oh, A-line's been resurfaced quickly.
yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
No,
Just-
exactly. And then from a coaching point of view, that's why I love the sport, because if you had someone arrive at the lab, say someone comes to university to see me in the lab, and I test their fitness.
Yep.
I'm like, you know what, he could be fitter, or I test their strength, he could be stronger, or he's really good at this. I can help them be better on the bike. I'm not gonna massively change them from being an also-ran to a winner. I appreciate that. You know, I appreciate in that side of what you're doing, you're making these small but serious improvements. But if you had the same person turn up and they said, Alan, I want to be a sprint cyclist on the velodrome, if I didn't see a certain potential, I'd be like, mate, there's no point.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what we do here. You're not going to be able to do that. You may as well go home.
Yeah.
But you have a downhill rider who's incredible on a bike, but is really weak. And you're like, hey, you're going to struggle when things get rough. Let's make you stronger to work with that. You know, you can work with what you've got, really. And that's amazing. So some people, you see a gap. And when I started working with Greg, I couldn't believe that I would find a gap. So I was really nervous when that was all put together through a physio I used to work with on the Athertons. And we went to Sheffield, actually. So I went up to Sheffield, Hallam, and I took all my stuff up there, and Greg was up there, Lucas Shaw and Loris Vergier. So it was the syndicate team at the time. And I was just parachuted in to run this camp for a couple of days. And I was like, don't fuck this up.
I remember that. I remember you coming up and doing it. We didn't meet, but I'm good friends with Joe Bowman.
Oh, really?
So I remember all this happening.
Yeah. So and they put me in this lab and none of the equipment worked. And then we had to move lab. And I was like, I remember sitting them down and Greg was like, what are we doing? And so I told him and he was like, why are we doing it? And I was like, fuck.
You're getting tested here by the goat,
Here
aren't
we
you?
go.
Yeah.
So I gave him my response and he was like, cool. And I was like, I think I passed that one. You know what I mean?
Terrifying.
I was like, here we go. And then, so you're working through this stuff and then we started to work in the gym and I remember thinking, you know what? I think we can make him a bit stronger here. I think that his history aerobically is unbelievable. I won't go into his numbers, but
I'm really interested in what tests.
Yeah, same.
Okay,
what are your benchmark tests that you're going through when you analyse a rider in terms of performance? We're going to get into that just after the ads. Oh, finally, we get to my favourite ad. I think it is probably my favourite because it's the easiest one.
Yeah, this one's easy, dude. If you've not got one of these and you're a mountain biker, then what are you?
What are you, dude? You're probably not cleaning your bike.
No,
you're certainly not. I didn't clean my bike before I got one.
I'm also quite guilty of it.
I mean, I didn't even have an outside tap before I got a
you
WORX
not?
Hydra Shot. That's right. We're talking about the WORX Hydra Shot.
Yes.
I use it every single ride.
Yep, same, mate. I'm with you almost every single ride. I'm going to say almost because that's the sort of guy I am. But I do try, and I still keep my bikes in the house. So I do have to make sure she's clean because she comes in the house, you know?
Yeah, there you go. But it is so easy because you've got the power share system. Yep. Obviously, that's the battery that comes out of, personally, my leaf blower, my impact driver, my chainsaw.
Okay.
I can carry on. Shall I carry on?
Carry on too.
Please,
we're doing house renovations at the moment, as you know, and I've got a few WORX tools in there. So I've been using a grinder, strimmer, done the garden recently.
Nice.
Impact driver.
Impact driver is lovely, yeah.
The tyre inflator.
Oh, I need to get one of them,
That's really sick. Hoover.
The Hoover's brilliant.
And all of it works off one battery.
It does.
Dream.
How good is that?
Yeah,
right.
Really
so there's the difference between when I first cleaned my bike with a Hydra Shot. Mm-hmm. We're on to the 56 bar version, aren't we?
Yeah, we are, mate. They've added some extra power. But
I've got to say,
not too much power.
No.
Which is nice.
It's absolutely perfect. This sounds like just something that you say in the adverts, and I bear in mind this is the adverts, but it is absolutely the perfect amount of pressure for a bike.
Totally.
Don't blow out your bearings.
Not going to blow out your bearings, exactly.
Right, shall I read some information about it?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so unlike conventional pressure washers with bulky body unit, mains connection, and garden hose attached to the tap, the new WORX Nitro high flow Hydra Shot, so that's the difference. It's the WORX Nitro high flow Hydra Shot, runs on batteries. It draws water from any source, so you can do it from a river in Wales when you're after the bike park. You can do it from wherever.
Yep,
you can do it. Bucket, pools,
bottle,
lakes, even seawater.
Bath.
It's ideal for cleaning around the house and patio.
Yep.
I mean, we're talking about bikes. I did just auto cue that and just read what it said.
But it's, again, it doesn't have to be used for your bikes.
You're
That's
right.
the cool thing. We use it around the house and
absolutely.
The house, you know.
And I do regularly.
Yes.
Equipped with WORX built brushless motor 2.0, this high pressure washer delivers excellent performance on powerful cleaning with a 220 litres an hour flow rate. That's a lot.
She's flowing.
Designed compact and portable at only 1.5 kilograms. You can take anywhere you need. It's got a 5-in-1 nozzle, actually also very useful.
Yes, sometimes you want it on the pinpoint.
Exactly.
Clean the patio or something like that. Sometimes you want it a little bit wider. Maybe you're watering the flower beds or something like that.
Absolutely. This goes through all the other applications.
But we know them, dude. We can move on. We know them. And if you don't know them, head to uk.worx.com.
Yeah.
And if you enter the code, the Ride Companion.
Yeah. Is that caps?
I have to ask. It is caps.
It's all caps, just the Ride Companion.
Yeah, just the Ride Companion. That's going to knock you 10% off.
Amazing. That's just on uk.worx.com.
Let's do 15% off.
Are you that powerful?
Yeah, we'll speak to him.
You're a podcast master.
Yeah, let's just do it for 2 weeks. 15% off.
2 weeks, 15% off. uk.worx.com with the code The Ride Companion, all capitals.
And it's across the whole range except the robot lawnmower. But everything else. So you could build out your garage a little
really
bit, man.
good,
Get yourself a Hydra Shot, get yourself a drill, grinder, strimmer, all kinds of things.
Sometimes when I feel lost in life, I actually just go on the WORX website because I can't believe they've got that many products. And
so many.
If I'm struggling for jobs to do, I'll go on the WORX website and it will actually lead me to the light. I'll find a job to do. They've got so many tools. It's insane.
Tool for everything.
Get yourself to uk.worx.com with the code The Ride Companion for 15% off for 2 weeks. I can't believe Davey's doing this, but he's doing it. He's pulling the trigger.
Yep.
Not literally, because we don't want to get the studio wet. Okay. Thanks, WORX.
Thanks, WORX.
Okay, we're back.
Good, innit?
That's impressive.
That was
good ad
impressive,
as well,
wasn't it? Yeah.
Best ad that.
You are good.
So good, that ad.
Yeah, it was
good. Oh
good,
my God,
it was
blown
good.
away.
Right, so the goats turned up at the gym.
Yeah.
Loris has turned up at the gym. Luca's turned up at the gym. What are we testing them on? What are we looking at?
So I'm trying to understand as much as I can about the individual. I've got a limited amount of time, and you're just trying to say, right, let's try and build a picture. And the first thing I try and build a picture of is their engine, their heart and lungs. How do they produce power? And a really good way of doing that is a sub-max test. And essentially you set a wattage, you sit at that wattage for 4 minutes, then you take a blood sample, you take a heart rate, and you also ask them how it feels, because surprisingly that gives you as much insight as anything.
Yeah.
So you ask them how it feels on what we call a Borg scale. So it's from 6 to 20. So if you do a scale of 1 to 10, people can quite often go, it's a 5 straight away. So this makes you think a little bit more about how does it actually feel. And you just, every 4 minutes, you increase the wattage slightly and you keep working. And because it's a submax, we don't need to take you to failure, because ultimately what we can do is we can plot a graph of lactate response, and it's not linear. So when you understand sort of what you're looking for, you can see where these two key markers are on the graph.
Yeah.
And some people can produce power all day long at low intensities. So they can go and they can go, but then all of a sudden, once you go past a certain point and it gets hard, they just basically blow a gasket. And that's indicative of training history. So a road cyclist will often have that profile. I trained a really high level road cyclist not that long ago, and he was at like 300 watts, 350, and I was like, whoa, this guy's an absolute monster, he's going to go on forever. But then all of a sudden he went over this sort of 4 millimole and he really struggled to adapt, and he blew a gasket. And then you talked to him about his training history, and all he does is really long road rides, and you're like, well, that makes sense. So that's one way to look at it. And what you're trying to do is understand, what is this person used to doing? So a mountain biker normally doesn't have a great aerobic base, but they're quite good when it starts to get going. So you're just trying to understand this.
And what do you mean by that? Sorry, aerobic base.
So aerobic base is basically what's the effort level you can sit out without fatiguing? Can you go all day long?
Right.
So it's not specific for downhill, and that's why people forget about it. But this aerobic system allows you to recover way more quickly. That underpins your recovery. So if I was to then ask you to do a really hard sprint repeat session, if you've got no aerobic base, you'll probably start vomiting halfway through the session, because you just can't recover. You can't get back to baseline. You can't flush this lactate out, this sort of muscle acidity that's horrible. So I'm trying to build this picture of the individual, and often it will give you really good insight. Right. So when I saw Greg, I was like, wow, he's really good at this. That bit could be improved. Cool, I've got something to work on. And then for Loris, it was, slightly different again. So you're like, oh, I can actually give some input here. Because initially, when you're working with a world-class rider, you're thinking, I've got nothing to input.
Yeah, it's really difficult, isn't it? I'd imagine, especially with three of them, you've got them all there. It's like,
yeah, and this is the thing. So, and I think with Luca, what was interesting is when I saw him move in the gym, he moved really well, but I thought he could maybe be even stronger. And then you start talking about how many reps he's, tell me about your training. And I was like, right, maybe you could try this because of what I've seen. And with Greg, I thought we could improve the strength side, because that was almost, he'd been working with Stefan Girard for years, and Stefan's like, he was like the pin-up coach. When I was growing up, he coached Voulios and Ancaro and Gracia, and he was the man. So, and Greg had been working with him for years. But what he'd been doing is working on this aerobic system, but maybe not so much the strength. So I'm not saying it was easy, but it was really clear what I was going to do. So I could say to Greg, look, this is what I'm going to do for this reason. I'm going to try and make you stronger.
Are the athletes usually open to it? Or do you ever get any pushback of like, I don't think I need it. Look how, especially with Greg. Like Greg could be like, I'm the goat. Like, what? I don't need this stuff.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, you said it.
No,
I'm the goat, mate. What are we doing here?
You normally find that the very best are open to always being better. They always want to be better. The people that are the dangerous ones to work with and the hardest ones are the ones who think they're really quite good. Because you'll go, how about this? Oh, I've done that. It didn't work for me. How about trying this? Done that. Didn't work for me.
Right.
And that's quite tiring. I don't have anyone push back and basically say no. I have a lot of people who say why. And it's important that they say why. They're not going to waste their time. Why are we doing this? So I'll give them a reason. And Luke Meyer-Smith sent me this message. I was asking him to do an exercise, and apparently someone had come up into, it was an isometric movement. So you work really hard, but nothing's moving. And he was like, this guy's come up into the gym and he's asking me, why are you doing this? And I don't know. Can you know what I mean? And I was like, really good point. I probably should have explained that more. And that's, you're always checking yourself, because I've been doing this for so long and I trust in what I'm doing. And I feel as though I've got enough of a track record just for people to go, Milway's probably on the right track.
Yeah, we've mentioned some names so far. They seem like,
But you can get into that point of just going, well, just do it. I've told you to do it. And that's not fair. I need to explain to someone why I'm asking you to do it, because it won't work for everyone. And there'll be something that if you don't explain it well, they're not going to actually do it properly. And often the time is if you ask someone to go for a recovery ride, they're useless. Mountain bikers are useless at doing that. They go too hard. The heart rate's too high. It's no recovery.
Oh, mate.
It's just, you know.
I went on a road camp. I went on an Alan Milway road camp. It was a zone, I can't remember, low zone road camp. I couldn't fucking do it. I literally couldn't do it. I had to go.
Yeah.
And I understand, like, that is, I would find that really difficult.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're almost putting the reins on someone and putting a rev limiter and say, please trust me, you just need to do this.
Yeah.
And it will affect further down the line. And bear in mind, I'm talking, what we call periodized training. Okay. So we start at one thing, trying to improve it. As we get close to the season, we try something else and try and improve that. And the whole idea is the closer you get to the season, the more specific it gets to the demands of what they're going to do. And so you might start off with something that looks initially a little ways away from where we're going, but then you've done that work, and then we get to this point and they're like, I get it now. I'm a monster at this because of all the hard work I put in.
By the way, I don't have to race Fort William. So for me, going at that heart rate was really difficult. I don't doubt the process, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, for
it's
sure.
like, it is quite hard to get your head around.
Absolutely. Because you always think harder is better. And I often find people maybe think that my training isn't hard because I don't smoke them every session. Yeah. And I think that, if you imagine, say you were going to pay someone to do a job for you and you turn up, you'd expect an outcome from that specific time you're with them. So say you go for a massage, you want to feel better out of the massage. Say you're going to go to the doctor, you want an outcome from that. I think some personal trainers or fitness trainers think that, right, the guy's in my gym now, I'm going to have to make him crawl out of here because otherwise he thinks he's not got his value for money. Yeah. And so I don't work with people in that way. I work with them for the year so they can understand that some days they come in, I'm like, I'm really sorry, boys, this is going to be miserable.
Yeah.
But I'll always try, and that's a lot of, we talked earlier about my motivations. I'm never going to compete with these guys, but I want to show them that I'm willing to do this too. I'll do this. I've done this. Yeah. You know, I'll be the hare to, you know, you can chase me up the hill on the road bike sort of thing, and I'll get more from them, but I'll show them I'm in the trenches with you here. You know, I'm not just sitting there drinking my cup of tea going, crack on.
Yeah.
So,
stroking a cat.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you've talked about the engine, the hardware.
Yeah.
I imagine there's a lot more to it than that. Like, let's go back to that camp where you're sort of feeling out where you're at with the riders. Psychologically, everyone is way more different than their physicality. Is that correct?
Hugely. If I'm, so Charlie, world champion, clearly the best rider in the world on the day, wearing the stripes for a year, the most chilled out, lovely bloke you'll ever meet.
Yeah,
lovely
big
guy.
up Charlie, yeah.
Just such a nice bloke. He's not the person you might think a world champion needs to be because he's not that competitive in a way. He just quietly goes about his business. He'll do what he can do. And he's almost I'll do my best. And if my best is good enough, that's fine. But then you've got these other people that are so fiercely competitive,
right,
that if there's no competition suggested, you're going to get nothing out of them.
Right.
Just nothing.
Interesting.
So you have to, if you have, so Danny and Gee, for example, they're both mega competitive people. And so from that point of view, I'm not saying you put them together, but I'm saying if I want to get something out of Danny, I've got to show him there's more, there's got to be almost a game here.
Gamify it, right?
Yeah. So one thing that I will often do is I will work my bollocks off, excuse the French, away from the gym on this one challenge to make myself quite good at it.
Yeah, I love this.
You know what I mean?
Right, go on, let's hear an example. I like this.
So I've got a
this
few.
This is the extra mile. This is why you go Milway.
So I'll often do this with so I'm quite good at squatting. So I'll do something where we'll have per kilo body weight, and I'll be like, right, if I beat you or if I do more reps at this percentage, then you've got to buy me lunch. And I know they won't, but I know I'll push it far enough that you did how many reps? And they're like, fuck, I'm going to have to pull my socks off. Or I did a press up challenge and I must have trained for 6 to 8 weeks every night at home doing press ups. And it was how many can you do in 4 minutes? And so I didn't tell anyone we were going to do this, and I made sure they were benching and they're doing upper body stuff. And I was like, right, boys, we're going to do a press up challenge now. And I explained the rationale behind it. And then I was like, right, we're going to go in hard. And they were like, how many's Milway done? And I was like, you're going to beat me, But I knew that I'd get more out of them.
Yeah.
It's not about me. It's
Yeah.
about getting more out of them. And it's just trying to see, like Charlie, there's no interest. Charlie's got no interest in that, for example.
Yeah.
But I'll often train with him. So I've been, like last year, we did a few sessions together and I was on the ski erg with him and he'd have his interval pacing and I'd have mine because I just can't keep up. And then in the gym, he'd have his weights and I'd have mine. But I was with him. It was like, look,
Yeah.
there wasn't like, I think Joe was away that day or whatever and it was just me and him. And I thought, look, I want you to see I'm doing this with you. But then other people, you're like, if I don't give you some sort of benchmark, I'm not going to get the most out of you. You're going to be not lazy, but you're going to say, oh, that's good enough. And I'm like, no, you can do more than that.
Yeah. How long does it usually take to figure that out with an athlete? Is it quite quick?
Yeah, you get to know. It's the time you spend with them. It's harder with remote athletes. And I work with quite a few people remotely now. And that's a different challenge in itself. So you've got, like I was on FaceTime with Dakota like on Friday and he was walking in the gym and I thought there might be an issue with something and he said, look, I'm on my way to the gym. Are you available? I'll just FaceTime you. And so we went through it that way. But I've got to think what's the biggest bang for his buck. I'm not going to necessarily do the same exercises or the same thing with him because you can't control it in the same way. I need it to be a really nice thing that he understands, goes in, delivers, feeds back to me on brilliant. We can make a progression.
Yeah.
So you're just trying to understand the rider, aren't you?
Yeah, totally.
How can I get the most from this person?
Do you have an opinion on what your dream sort of like, both physically, what the best downhill athlete would be in terms of their physical build-up and psychologically? What would you imagine it would look like?
I'd say
if you go ground up. Sorry.
Yeah, the psychological thing ultimately, I think, is where you'd start. I think it's really like, are athletes born or are they made? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I find it so interesting because I'm not a good racer, but I am competitive, and I was good at basketball in a team environment, and then when it's on my own, I'm not as good. I just can't perform, and then I'm always impressed. I'm always impressed by my friends, obviously.
Yeah.
But when I see them actually in the moment, and after spending all my time with them, like seeing like Bren, for instance, at Rampage, like the motivation he has to get up first thing in the morning and do something is like, I'm really motivated. I know I'm really disciplined and motivated. And still, as soon as it gets there, I'm like, whoa, I'm so glad I'm not you. You know, it's 7 a.m, you're doing it, there's helicopters firing up and you're flipping off something, and like, and the same with like World Cup racing, just the demands on people. Why does it suit some people? Why does it?
This is it. I learned how different I was to these. I realised very early on that they are a different breed to me.
Right.
And the first time that came about in a most stark way was mid-2000s. I wasn't coach. I'd been coaching Gee, like putting some programs together for him. And I went to stay at his house to go ride at Tom's Farm, which was this gnarly like motocross place in Wales. You could turn up with your bikes and you could just ride the hills, ride wherever. And there was me, Rach, Gee Athy, and then there was another lad called Marcus, who's like a junior, really good junior downhill, who just got a motocross bike. Now, I'm not great on a motocross bike. I had a 250F. Rach was there on a 110 or whatever. And then there was this group of 5 of us, and we went to Tom's Farm. Now, after that, I was then going to give a talk at the dirt bike show. I was giving a talk daily at the dirt bike show about training for motocross. And I remember I was like, it's fine. I can go at the end of the day and deal with that. I'll go for this ride. So we all turned up to Tom's Farm, and it was bogging. You know what it's like in middle of Wales in November or whatever it was. And it was puddles everywhere. These hills are massive. And Gee and Affy are like, right, we're off up there. Boom, off they go. And you're like, oh, right, okay, here we go. And you're trying to keep up, and you obviously don't. And you fall off, and you can't get up the hill. And they help you. And then you get to the next bit, and they help you. And we did 3 hours. And we do 3 hours, and we come back to the van. And I was, I'm so glad that's over. And I lean my bike up against the side of the van, and I'm getting undressed and getting into my stuff. And I'm like, how am I going to wash this stuff? Putting it all in a bag. I've got to go straight to my hotel, put the bike in. And I look up, and Gee and Affy are changing their gloves and changing their clothes and putting fresh, like, motocross gear on. I'm like, what are you doing? Oh, we're going back out. And that was like, you know what I mean? I was like, I could not imagine anyone who'd done 3 hours of like the gnarliest, hardest, most physical stuff. And that was their morning. They're like, oh, we just had a sandwich, we're going back out again. And I was like, I can't understand that. Just different breed. And that was like this level at which I really understood, like, that's out of my comfort zone. I was pushed to the limit. And maybe if it was something much easier for me to do, I'd have wanted, but I just could never see myself. I'm like, I'm done. I'm tapping out here. And they were just warming up. It's like, yeah, okay.
How, going to go back a little bit.
Yeah.
From when you first started with the moto guys and G initially to the program that you work on now, like what's changed in between there, like the most? Because there's a decent amount of time, with great respect. But how does your program differ? And is there more science involved? Like, how has it changed?
Well, that's a really good question. I'd say there's two things changed quite a lot to start with. The first was I was basing everything on physiology. So that was a lot of what I'd done in my degree, understanding how basically why does the body get tired? So if you think about that as your like hypothesis or your like mission statement, why does the body get tired? You then look at downhill and go, right, why does downhill make you tired? Let's try and adapt to it. So that was very much the starting point for my training then. Right. And then the strength side of it was almost like a bodybuilding style program to like make the muscles a bit bigger and a bit stronger. And I'd split the days. I'd have an upper and a lower, and I'd do quite high reps, and I'd do isolated shoulder movements. And I was just trying to build the muscles. And then when 2010 comes, and basically I'm a PE teacher at the time as well, because I couldn't make a living at doing this. So I was a PE teacher at school. And so all of this was like working together. And this new headmaster came to the school, and I hated him. Like literally, I was like, I can't work with this guy. I'm not very good at working for people. I don't know why, but it's sort of my way, I guess. Don't know if it's my upbringing or what, and I remember thinking, I'm not going to be able to work with this guy. And after 3 weeks, he calls me into his office and he goes, we're not going to be able to work together, are we? And I was like, yeah, you're right. And he said, look, I'll cut you a deal. I'll give you this qualification I was working towards, but you do the qualification at another school. I'll give you a severance pay, and then you're off.
Brutal.
So I was like, okay, cool.
Done.
See ya.
So I got straight onto Giant, because Danny was riding for Giant at the time. I said, look, is there any budget so I can do more with Danny? And they gave me a bit of a budget and said, look, let's see what we can do. And, 2010, 2011, big year, became world champion at Champery. I really felt as though I was like, how have I got myself into this? The phone was starting to ring. It was like, Milway's able to do something for us here. But I felt really underqualified. I felt as though I needed to almost go back to school. So I went and took quite a high level strength and conditioning course, sort of a degree level thing. And that's what changed really. I went back to the practical delivery of what I was doing. So I had a really good theoretical understanding, and I went back, and it was quite funny. The first thing I went to, so it was all held at universities. I went to universities all around the country for like a year to do this. And the first one was at Bath University. And I turn up and I walk into the classroom, and there's like 20 people in there. And I sit down at the back of the class because I was like, I just want to do my job. I just want to learn here. I want to be nobody, and I want to learn. And this guy turns around and goes, you're Alan Milway, you coach Danny Hart. I was like, fuck. I was like, I just wanted to be out of the way. No one's going to know me in here. And all of a sudden I was like, I thought he would expect me to know stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Right. Because you've achieved.
Yeah, because I'd achieved something. He was like, right, you all know about this. And I was like, no, I don't know anything. I know nothing, mate. And all I wanted to do was just like put my cap down and just start again. But that process was really rewarding. It was really challenging. And I failed the weightlifting. I had to do a practical delivery on weightlifting in 2012, and I failed it. I had to drive to London to give this demonstration, and I won't debate whether it makes you a better coach or not, but to pass this element, I had to deliver a snatch and a clean and jerk with these weightlifting movements. And I'd literally got out the van, and this guy from Chelsea Football Club was assessing me, and he was a horrible bloke. And I could just tell he was just like, you ain't going to be able to do this. And he failed me. And
you do the movements.
yeah, and you have to talk them through it, and you have to
Right.
explain the anatomy and the biomechanics of it and why you were doing it. And it's a really detailed explanation of what you're doing. But as part of it, you have to practically deliver it.
Yeah.
And he failed me on the delivery. And I remember being absolutely devastated because it affected, literally it was basically saying you're not good enough, and also you're not going to pass this qualification. So I then went to see a coach, and I worked with that coach intensively for 8 weeks. And then I went to join a weightlifting club, and I fell in love with weightlifting, and it was just the best thing. So 2012, I went to the Olympics to watch the weightlifting, joined a weightlifting club, and then that was a whole new lease of life. So I was the weakest guy in a room with Olympians in it. I trained with a guy who competes in the Olympics, and it was again, I was like, I'm home. I'm this weak guy who's got nothing to prove, but they were stoked for me. They were throwing 200 kilos over their head. So again, I was just like, hey, if you're in a room with the downhiller thinks they're strong. And that really helped me. You're not strong, dude. You know what I mean?
You're really not.
You're really not.
Yeah.
And that was really enlightening, because you can sort of, in your little fishbowl, and professional downhill mountain biking is still a fishbowl, you can think you're top dog. And what I think that helped me is to go, no, fuck, blow the glass ceiling off this. We've still got so much more room to grow. So what was a really negative experience turned out to be a really positive one. So to answer your question in a massively long-winded way, it was practical delivery and the science of the strength and conditioning side that got better.
So a lot of it is your own personal development, really.
Massively,
as well.
yeah. I used to go so every winter I used to go and see different people. And the most interesting guy I ever saw was a horse racing trainer, because I thought to myself, what can I learn from I want to learn from different sports. And so I phoned up this guy. I'm not going to mention his name because I don't want anyone else going to see him, because he's incredible. But he invited me up to Leyburn in North Yorkshire. So I just went up there, got a hotel, and I went into the village, and it was like you're in like another world. All these people were trotting around on these beautiful racehorses, and he had hundreds of acres. But why I wanted to go and see him is these horses are worth £1 million each. He's got to deliver. He's got stakeholders. He's got a big team of people.
Yeah.
He's got to manage. You've got the fast racehorse and you've got the slow one. Well, what do? Do you put the fast one on his own and the slow one on his own? And I was thinking from an athlete point of view, do I differentiate? Am I differentiating too much? Should they just be doing the same thing? I thought I must be able to learn something from this guy. So I went up and he invited me into his big farmhouse. Beautiful, as you can imagine. And he was sitting there, he had glasses on, he had the racing post, and he had the TV on with the racing. And he lowers his glasses, puts his thing down, I introduced myself. And he says, sit down. He said, have you come up here to tell me how to train my racehorses? And I said, no, I've come up here to see how you do it. I'm fascinated. And he goes, we're going to get along just fine then.
No way.
And he was incredible.
Mate, how interesting.
Incredible. And he had these colour-coded charts.
I was going to say, what did he take?
Yeah,
away from? What are the
so
things?
much.
Whack them on the arse harder.
Yeah, he's like,
and then they go
oh,
quicker.
you need a whip.
Well, you know what? No,
Danny. That's what he needed.
the thing that really stood out is if there was an injury, is how do they recover from injury? And it was a really graded response, which is what you think. Yeah, on big shotgun. Yeah. But that's cruel, mate.
But they do, don't they? Like racehorses go, don't they?
Yeah, but only if they've got a compound fracture of the leg.
Is it not a normal fracture as well?
Well, I'm not going to debate when they shoot a horse.
I don't know. I don't know when they do, but I thought they did because the weight of the animal is just too much compared to the leg.
If we're talking about a strain, should we say?
Okay.
If they've got they got a cold.
Sorry.
Yeah, they don't just shoot. But it was just interesting seeing how he was very, very good at managing a group, and I knew that in a team situation, it's the same problems. We've got the same challenges. And he basically said the fastest horse will always run at the front and the others will always want to keep up. And I think that's a really good metaphor. I was like, you know what? That's a really good metaphor. Let's not try and differentiate everyone. Let's actually bring them together. And from that, the following year when I was working with Gee, so Gee was, in 2013, he was fighting for the overall with Stevie Smith. And then second overall, and then coming in 2014. And in 2014, I was also coaching Matt Simmons. And they wanted to be sort of two silos, two separate people. And I was desperate to bring them together. And I was trying to explain to Gee, you will be better, working with these other athletes as opposed to on your own, just doing your own thing. I think you can get more from being with him. And that was one of those things that I'd learned to reassure myself this probably was the right way to go. So we did for example, we did a 10-mile time trial together. And that's another one that I was like, I'm going to do it too, boys. You know what I mean? I'm going to work my balls off. You're going to smoke me, but you better beat me by a good margin. And again, they did really well at it because you've got two competitive alphas. And I knew Gee wouldn't let Simmons beat him. So I knew I'd get the most out of him. But no matter how good Simo was going to be at that, and he was fit, because of Gee's mental approach, I was like, you just won't physically let him beat him. And therefore, is that not even more of a reason to put these people together?
Yeah. Was it common before then, in 2010 or whatever?
No, not at all.
For athletes to train together,
no.
They all did their own separate thing.
They all did their own thing.
And all on totally different paths.
Yeah. And therefore, you'd come and they'd ride together, but I think you would never always have the very top guys working together. And often that's because, they're from different countries, like Sam and Gwynny and Stevie Smith and Gee, and you're not going to find them in the same place, are you? They're all around the world. But I was trying to get to that point where and I'd love to think in the future, I don't know how to do it, but I'd be able to I'm doing some stuff with Red Bull on team camps and stuff like that. And I think that's they're trying to bring people together to learn.
Right.
And that side of it. Yeah, it's those meetings. I went to see Skeleton Bob. I went to see them, the Olympics. I went to spend a day with British rowing, for example. I'd done loads of these things because I felt as though we're so in our infancy of understanding how to do these things. And to have someone give me their time and be able to learn from them and then try and apply it to me, I was like, oh, okay. So it wasn't just the exercises. It wasn't like, oh, I'm going to take that exercise. It was, how do you manage these people? How do you get the most from them?
Drive to Survive has just brought out a new series.
Yes.
Did you watch that?
I'm very lucky. My wife loves Drive to Survive.
Oh, it's absolutely...
It's brilliant,
in terms of like a psychological study and seeing how these people work on a team. Because, all right, downhill's got some similarities to F1, but also they are on track at the same time, so that's different. But still, how they treat... There's obviously always a number one driver and a number two seat. And it's like... I just think it's so interesting. Like that, I'm on an episode with Gasly and Ocon at the minute, teammates and old friends, but they fell out.
Right.
Basically. So these are two people that really don't get on, and they've done this media thing of them both in go-karts racing around a track, and they're like, just go slowly. We're just doing it for the cameras, trying to make it not a competitive thing, and it's just instantly straight away.
It's exactly, it's and it would have been, you'll have seen the one where they talk about Williams' new director of performance, whatever. But he used to work for Toto Wolff. And do you see the scene when they're both in the room together and Toto's being completely dominant over him? He's like, change your shirt's creased, you need to have the logo like this. And it's like a power trip. He's like, look, you might be my competitor, but I'm top dog here. And he was you could see him physically lean over him and assert his dominance on the situation. And this is, it's what you see in these sports. And I think you need to be aware of it and understand it and work with it. And so when you're working with an athlete, you want them to feel comfortable, because some of them, they don't get the most from that butting heads. And mountain bikers, we're really lucky because we don't have to butt heads. You can be stoked for the other guy. Because I'm a big believer in mountain biking. I don't think is a zero-sum game. So football is a zero-sum game. You've got a winner, and by definition, you have a loser. But in mountain biking, you've got a winner. But if the other guy comes fifth, you can still be stoked for him. You don't have to have him do badly. You just need to do your thing. Yeah. And I think you get more from people that way.
Okay. Yeah. We spoke outside about working with the general public, which is not something you do.
Not anymore. I just simply don't have the time.
Okay.
Which is, really quite shocking.
It's good.
But nice. I'm that busy. Yeah.
So my question was going to be, and I forgot it, but it'll come. It's coming. There it is.
Do you think there's a difference? Is that what you're saying about what general public needs, maybe?
Yeah, there was something probably along that lines. And if it wasn't, it's probably better. So that's
No, because I have people who sometimes want to train like a pro, and they're like, how can I train like this, or how can I train like that?
Do they need to touch LEDs on boards and stand on a balance
Don't
ball?
start me on that. A couple of years ago, we're going to go off another tangent here.
please.
A couple of years ago, standing at the top of the elite women's field, some of them were juggling balls, and they'd have their coach like tell them to spin round and throw something at them, and I was like, you've just watched Drive to Survive. And it's like it really frustrated me, because I remember saying to someone who was doing that, when was the last time you did that? Oh, the last race. Well, it's not a skill you're getting any better at, is it? You're basically making the success or failure of this really crucial moment before your race run down to an ill-adapted skill you've got. You know what I mean? You're just chucking a ball at someone. And there's no transfer of any positive in that, apart from taking your mind off what's about to happen.
Right.
And so
it's
if
not
you've
getting
got
anything firing.
nothing
going on. Nothing going on.
It's a real bugbear of mine to see this stuff. I'm like, why are you doing this? But to be pragmatic about it, if you've got someone who is super nervy and you're at the top of the hill with them, why not? You know, as long as it's not going to be a negative. But that's why I think there's a positive way to do it. And then you see this tennis ball rolling past you and you're like, well, that's not helped anyone, has it? They missed catching that. So
it's so true.
Yeah.
All right then, so let's say that's the extreme end of training and being ready for downhill. We're talking about the everyman training program. Give me 3 exercises that you think help on a bike after the ad break.
Ollie, mate, it's the ads. What are you doing?
Well, I didn't think I'd have to stop. It's so quiet.
I know you've been riding a lot and you're really trying to focus on recovery, but you can't always be recovering, can you?
I can if I sponsor this COMPEX and you got the Fix 2.0 and I'm making my legs feel better.
Oh, mate.
Honestly, this thing is incredible. It's been helping me out loads. I've been riding a lot, and this thing, I get home and I just use it for recovery. You can use it for before as well, though, right?
You can, mate. Yeah, the COMPEX Fix 2.0 Master helps warm up muscles before a workout.
Oh, nice.
And relieve stiffness after a hard session, okay?
That's what I'm using it for. Yeah, I've just finished a hard session, so.
Yeah, it has 5. Ollie.
Yeah.
It's my favourite tool as well, all right? The COMPEX Fix 2.0 massager helps warm up muscles before a workout and relieve stiffness after a hard session.
Yeah.
Okay, it's got 5 powerful intensity settings.
Oh, yeah, it has. That's done with this dial here.
That's done with a
it's
dial.
Really good. Yeah.
Paired with a high stall force will give the intense pressure needed to help relieve the toughest spots safely and comfortably.
Hey, I want to point out that the stall force thing is really important, because when you're pushing down hard, really getting in those difficult points,
nooks and crannies,
it's not stalling. And some of the other ones, I'll be honest, not only did I buy them off Amazon, they stalled and then they set my house on fire. Oh. So you don't want that.
No, mate, you don't want that at all. It also comes with 5 interchangeable tips.
Yep.
Okay, and a rotating arm helps tailor your massage specific to the needs of different muscle groups. Okay. Yep. It has a removable and rechargeable batteries, a compact design, and a quiet motor help provide relief anywhere and everywhere. Okay, so you can bring your inner pro with the Fix 2.0 massage.
That rhymed.
Gun. It did rhyme.
Just saying that rhymed.
It did rhyme. But yeah, honestly, dude, real life experiences. I use mine all the time. Post-ride, pre-ride. I just love using the COMPEX Fix 2.0.
Do you know what I found the other day? I was at my physio. Everything he had was COMPEX. I really liked that.
Mate,
It's really good.
Chosen by professionals.
Yeah.
And they do loads of other stuff too. So check out compex.com. All right. You can look through all of the different recovery tools. They've got
muscle stims. I've been using the muscle stims.
Yeah, they got the core belt. They got this ankle protection. You need some of that.
Need it.
Wrist protection. Maybe need some of that.
I do now.
Yeah.
Oh.
Loads of stuff.
I'm going to get COMPEXed up, dude.
COMPEXed up.
Hey, do we have anything to offer to our companionship? Because I do like it when we finish ads on an offer.
Yeah, we got to finish on. Hey, it's a big offer too, mate.
Is it?
Yeah. So if you head to compex.com, enter the promo code The Ride Companion.
Okay.
What is it?
The Ride Companion.
All in caps.
Okay, nice. I was about to ask.
We're going to knock off a whopping 20% off.
20%?
20% off. Now, if that's not a deal to get you recovered, ready to ride through spring, then I don't know.
Hey, you
Can't
might
do any better.
You might get 20% off, but you're going to be 100% satisfied with the product, let me tell you.
And on that note,
that was nice.
Thank you, COMPEX.
Thanks, COMPEX. Dude, the ad was so good. I almost forgot the question, but I've remembered the question. That ad was good, wasn't it?
That ad.
Yeah,
Unbelievable
me too.
offer.
But the question was, right? I don't think I even finished the question before the ad break.
This is sparkling water. It looks like I'm drinking a beer. But
Had to make that clear, didn't you?
Yeah, I need to make that clear.
Mum, it's not beer. So, 3 exercises that you feel most help
Yeah.
general fitness for a mountain biker is a bit of a broad, silly question, but I also think it's one that maybe a lot of our listeners, maybe they're thinking about getting into training. They want to do 3 exercises. What 3 would you put at the top of your list?
The first thing I put on the top of my list is actually, and it's going to sound stupid, is about riding your bike during the week. So whether that be on a stationary bike, whether that be going out after work, whether that be riding to work, because a lot of people you speak to who are general population who've got 9 to 5 jobs, they've got families, they've got children, they've got commitments, is they get that excited to ride their bike at the weekend. They don't do anything during the week to help them. Then they go out on the weekend and then they get frustrated because after an hour and a half, they're absolutely cooked. And they're thinking, well, hang on a second, how do I get more out of my weekend? And the way I'm looking at it is, how are you going to enjoy your weekend more?
That's
on
a
your
really good point. I don't think that's stupid at all. I think that's...
So,
because the fitter you get, the more fun it gets.
Fact.
Yeah, and the way you can do that, so I think the best way to do that is have something at home to help you. Invest in yourself in some way. I've got a watt bike in my garage. As you can imagine, I've got everything I need, but I will often go in there after the kids go to bed and I know the heart rate I want to be at. I'll put my iPad on and I'll watch something that's going to be an hour long. And it's just so easy to tick it off. Yeah. It doesn't have to be at any intensity, really. It's something you can just sustain comfortably for an hour, and that will make a massive benefit. If you did that twice a week, you probably doubled your riding time for the week for a lot of people. Yeah. So I'd say that's definitely the first thing. The second thing in terms of exercises, I'd work on mobility, believe it or not, because a lot of people really struggle. If you watch them from behind, say you're going up the hill following somebody, you might well see their knee wobbling all over the place and everything upstream of that causing problems. And often that comes from the ankle. So if you've not got enough ankle range, it can often cause issue with the knee, which can often cause problems, or you're just not your position on the bike isn't very good. And sedentary lifestyles, people sitting in cars, on phones, or the rest of it. If you're on a bike for a couple of hours and you complain of a sore lower back, probably it's because you're super tight anterior hip. You've got no decent posture. So that's something that's easily rectified. YouTube videos, 10 minute, he sits up straight. Those things are all easily achievable. Yoga mat, my wife does 10 minutes every day, just, 10, 15 minutes.
I didn't think you were going to say that. It's very interesting. That's cool, yeah.
So I'd say that, one, if we're talking about enjoyment, ride a bike more often. Yeah. Mobility, and again, that gives you that self-assessment. Am I struggling here? Are my hips pinching? Are they sore? Because ultimately it allows you to do more riding and be pain-free. And then I would have a strength movement and I would have a deadlift or a squat in there, because they're sort of global exercises. A squat loads you sort of it's like squishes your spine, so to speak, which fires everything up around it. Really good stability, really good trunk, and directly translates to pedal power. So that's the way I do it. I wouldn't get carried away on trying to lift crazy weight, but I would be progressive with it.
Okay. So specifically, let's take each one. So you've done the bike for an hour. Mobility, it's just general work on it.
Yeah.
It's for something like a squat, let's say. Should people work towards 10 reps, would you say would be sensible?
So what I often find is if you give a rep range of over 8, people never lift enough weight. They just don't put enough weight on the bar. So that's a big thing that I find is if I work to, say, 8 to 12 reps is hypertrophy, building muscle size, 9 times out of 10, when you see someone working within that rep range, they've got loads in the tank. There's loads left. And if you want to work to 8 reps, I want that 8th rep to be misery. Right. And you need 3 minutes of trying to get your life back in order and stop seeing stars and be ready to go again. That, when I'm training an elite athlete, that's what we're trying to do. And I can work out the weight needed There's some equations you can do when you know a 1 rep max or how much they can lift for this many reps. You can predict it relatively accurately. And sometimes they look at the program like, you want me to do this for this many reps? I'm like, trust me, you can. It won't be easy. You won't want to look at your phone between sets. You'll need to have a sit down and a reflection on life after it, but you can do it. And that makes you really, really strong. But if we're talking about rep range for your average guy, I'd actually lower the reps. I'd be down at 5 because the quality will stay. So you'll get more quality movement with more weight, and you can do 4 or 5 sets of 5. I would often do that for someone, because if you ask them to do 6, 7, 8, the quality goes, unless they've got really good movement patterns, you see them shifting into one hip. A deadlift for high reps is real dangerous if they start rounding their back. So I'm just trying to mitigate, make it safe, but actually make it progressive.
I think that's really good advice. It's cool. It's cool it coming from you, because I think probably the gym is quite intimidating for people, and they want to be better at biking, and they want to enjoy their weekends more biking. Yeah. So
you mentioned loads of different ways then that you could do a squat or a deadlift incorrectly. Could you do that with mobility? Can you be incorrect in your mobility work?
That's a good point. I would, if I was trying to work on my mobility, I would simply put into YouTube 10-minute yoga video. And that's what I would do as a starting point, because there's so many different ones out there, and you can't go far wrong with yoga movements, because 9 times out of 10, any mobility exercise I set someone. I remember doing some mobility that, just for myself, my wife walks in and goes, oh, that's Warrior 3, or oh, that's, and you're like, oh, really? So it all sort of come from there anyway. Okay. So I think that's your best starting point. You can, if you want to explore these things a bit more, a physiotherapist is a great call, because they can start to maybe explain why some of these things are happening. Okay. But I'd say 90% of the time, you do something in yoga and you're like, you know what, my ankle feels super tight there, or you know what, my hamstrings are awful, or I can't twist that way very well because it pinches in here. And that reflection just means you can maybe, it motivates you to do a little bit more.
Do you work on nutrition too with athletes? Okay, so again, can we do something similar with the everyday person or everyday mountain biker? What should their diet look like? I
think it's what your diet looks like really is the things that you probably could eat less of. Okay, for a lot of people. I know a lot of my friends who drink alcohol during the week, and that blows my mind, because it's just taking on these calories that you're never going to expend. And normally it's indicative of something under, like, why are you doing that? Because I've got a real stressful job, or I don't like my wife, or any of these things, you need to strip down underneath that and understand why you're having those 3 or 4 beers in the evening. So alcohol's one of them. I'm not saying don't drink, but, if you find people grazing on alcohol a lot, they probably carry too much weight. And secondly, I'd fuel for what you're doing that day. Okay. So if your day involves being sat in front of a computer, you do not need a lot of calories to fuel that day.
That's what's difficult, because if I was sat behind a computer, I would be more likely to eat more than if I was doing a massive bike ride. I'd eat nothing. I quite often forget to have lunch on a big day riding.
That's the cruel irony. If you're sat in front of the computer doing something mindless, you want a cup of tea and a couple of biscuits. I don't blame you. I'm not saying I'm not a monk, but so you can be a bit clever with these things. So protein is really good at filling you up. So if you have something with high protein content, so some unsalted nuts, for example, you won't need many of them until you feel as though you've had something, and that's probably quite a good way to do it. Carbohydrate people will often have way too much, but carbohydrate is not the enemy. And again, that's something that a lot of social media will portray, that carbs are evil and we'll just eat meats, and these fad diets, they do my head in, because if you think about why they're doing it from an aesthetic point of view, or they're trying to explain to you that cut out the carbs and it will make you lean. But if you look at a Tour de France cyclist, those guys are taking on 120 grams of carbohydrate every hour, which is, you and I couldn't physically do that. We'd struggle to take in that much, and it would make us feel ill. Yeah. The reason why they're doing it is they're fueling their exercise. So it's just understanding, am I going out for a long ride today? Yeah, let's fuel it. Again, if you're going out for a 90-minute bike ride with your mates around Peaslake, you don't need energy gels. You don't need caffeinated drinks. You don't need a bottle full of, energy drink or supplement or whatever. And because if you're burning 400 or 500 calories and you're taking in 400 or 500 calories, you're at net zero.
Net zero, yeah.
So what are you trying to get out of it? I think just a little bit of reflection. A lot of people, if they just wrote down everything they put in their mouth for 3 days on a note, they'll probably be surprised.
Yeah.
Like,
I've been doing it recently, just tracking.
Yeah. What did you find it interesting? Did something jump out at you as a good or a bad thing?
Just that for me, I need a lot more calories than I expected I would do.
Yeah, interesting.
Just to maintain.
Yeah.
So me, if I'm like between 3,000 and 3,200.
Yeah.
I stay the same.
That's interesting. That's quite high, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Which is quite. I mean, I do a fair bit.
Yeah.
But I'm not like.
Yeah.
Mountain bike guy who's constantly riding. I do enough.
Yeah. How do you find out what calorie intake you need?
How do you find? So the way I've done it is you just find what your base seems to be. So I've done it, and Alan's going to correct me here, but I basically used MyFitnessPal and started tracking everything you eat, and then you just literally see what happens to your weight.
Interesting.
So then I weigh myself every 4 days, and then it's like it's stayed the same. And I've noticed that the calories are between 3,000 and 3,200.
Yeah, interesting.
And then if you want to lean, you just drop that off, right? And if you want to bulk, you try and do more, but it's very hard to do more.
Well, it is.
It's really difficult.
Yeah.
Hence the sweet potato.
Yeah,
Rice outside, trying to eat more.
This is it.
So,
and for athletes who are trying to get bigger, that's why it's hard to get big. Like this, putting my PE teacher hat on, it really stressed me out when I was teaching PE to 16-year-old boys and girls, is you'd open up this book and it would have strength, and underneath it would be a bodybuilder. And you'd be like, no. You're correlating these two very different things together, and it's actually a really frustrating thing because immediately you're just pumping into this adolescent's head that strength equals big muscles.
Yeah.
When in actual fact, there's 100% chance that bodybuilder's on steroids anyway, and to get to that naturally requires so much protein intake, is very difficult, and a very committed lifestyle to it.
Yeah.
And it's not just the force of the muscle, if you explain that. So that's something that, if you're trying to work with a pro rider and they're training 2-3 times in a week or in the gym, and then they're adding on all these other sessions, often they need to take in more protein, and their protein intake just isn't enough. So it's being aware of that. But it's understanding what's going on. Some people, if you've got this resting metabolic rate, everyone is slightly different. In the lab, the physiologists can work it out very, very accurately, and they'll actually have someone lie down and they'll put a mask on them, and they'll shut the lab and they'll put like quiet please, and basically you just try and have someone completely chill out, and then you can work out how much energy their body needs just to do these basic life maintenance tasks, and then you can scale that for the day, and then you can build up this program for that athlete and try and understand how best to help them.
Interested.
Yeah.
What's your thought on some of the more like holistic approaches now? Like, say now, they've been around forever, but like cold exposure, heat exposure, do you build that into your athletes' training? Or
Yeah, another good question.
Thank you.
Cold exposure is a really interesting one. So with these things, how I say I try to understand it and put myself in that position. When this started to come out as being cold was a very fashionable thing to do, I thought, right, well, let's bloody do it. So I did it every morning for 3-4 months just to try and understand. And it was a really good lesson in building a habit.
okay.
So if you build a habit, you try and knock down as many barriers to that habit as possible. So instead of like buying something that I put outside on my patio, I realised that for me to get out of my nice warm bed, walk downstairs, past the cats that would want feeding, out the door, get in there, come back up, drip water all the way back around the house, cats who still want feeding, wake the house up. You know what I mean? I was like, this ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
So I'd run a cold bath the night before, and then I'd get in that.
Nice.
And then I get straight in the shower. And then I realised that as you got used to it, like the water was actually relatively warm after it being there overnight, so you have to run it cold. So what I'm saying is I've been through it, and I found I felt if you can deal with 3 minutes in freezing cold water first thing in the morning, your day's only going to get better. It's as simple as that. Nothing is going to stress you out. And I found from a psychological point of view, I thought it was brilliant.
Same as what I've had with it. Exactly.
Bricklayers used to do it on site. They'd put their hands in the water butt.
Really?
Yeah. They'd just put their hands in the water butt. They'd count to whatever a minute, and then the rest of the day they wouldn't have cold hands.
It's
That's brilliant.
That sort of, I think that side is brilliant. The problem with cold water exposure is timing.
Right.
So if you were part of the adaptation process of the body to exercise is the inflammation, like the resultant inflammation. So if you do a gym session, the muscle damage, which is essentially what it is, signals for this protein turnover, protein synthesis, muscle building, repair, recovery, etc. If you stunt that by getting you're going to minimize that or reduce it.
Yeah.
So it can get in the wrong timing, but at a race weekend, it's super efficient because you want to try and reduce that inflammation and get back down to baseline.
Right.
So we've the Athertons had like a wheelie bin, simply a brand new wheelie bin, filled it with water. It was there, put ice in it, and then we'd have it as part of the recovery process because over that race weekend, you want to get back to baseline as quick as you can.
Yeah.
So these sorts of things are good. Heat exposure, I've got less experience with. My main concern is dehydration with that, is understanding the dehydration, the resultant dehydration of that.
Okay.
Because it's worth weighing yourself before and after because you might be quite surprised.
And it's interesting. Yeah. I hadn't ever thought about actually you could measure it by just weighing.
Yeah, it's a really, like the weighing scales are such a useful tool. Like you might think it's oversimplifying it, but ultimately you're trying not to get into the weeds with these things because you have to think of the person you're working with. If you're working with an Olympic rower who's quite happy to stare at a wall for hours on end all day, you know what I mean? They're going to be into that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
We had
They're willing to do that.
Yeah. But a mountain biker, it's the other. We were training together. Me, Charlie, and Joe were training in a gym in Shrewsbury, and it was a JD gym, and it's got all the best kit in it. And we were training in there, and this, we were rowing, and this girl comes up to us, and she was in like lycra leotard with her shoes. I was like, well, this girl's clearly a rower, and she was in a right flap. She was like, you know what, I just can't get, can I try your rowing machine? The rowing machines just haven't got the right drag factor. And she was stressed because the rowing machine wasn't giving her the drag factor number she needed because it hadn't been cleaned out properly. And I was like, oh my God, you're dry. This is, this
just numbers.
Just numbers.
It's fascinating, the spectrum of different people, because when you think about like even the spectrum of people you work with, how different everyone is. Like your example earlier was Charlie and Danny, wasn't it, or something like that? Yeah. And like you think that's within people that want to hurtle down rock gardens, as fast as they can. That in itself is a tiny group of people,
exactly,
that can get so obsessed that they get to be one of the fastest in the world at hurtling down rock gardens on a bicycle. Like we're missing out. Think of rowers.
I know, and road cyclists. I don't think I'd be a very effective coach for road cyclists.
Interesting.
I really don't, because I'm like, for fuck's sake, you know what I mean? Just get.
I know what you mean, dude.
Because there's the numbers of that. Like, why haven't I been at my FTP's 345 watts, and today I was producing this wattage, and you're like, you just go, right, okay. So then you try and explain. Could it have been how much sleep did you get last night?
Yeah.
Could it have been what you have for breakfast, caffeine intake, resting heart rate, heart rate variability? You could really get into the depth, but the problem is that, does it really matter?
Dude, I don't. I have this conversation. George, my girlfriend is a road cyclist, and I have this conversation so much. And it strikes me, it's amazing that you can be so different. Like your approach to like sport, like what sport is. It's so cool.
Yeah.
There's like a sport for everyone.
Exactly that.
Like it's completely her escape. And she like records it and like has numbers and targets and all of this, but that's her escape. She doesn't want to go down a slippery slope laughing. Yeah. And when you think about it, that's pretty weird as well.
Well, it is.
I mean, we all do it, but.
And I'm not like, let's be clear, I'm not trying to belittle that approach.
No.
There's no effort for me to say one's better than the other. It's just different. And I think I try and look at the big picture. Yeah. And I find I don't get too caught up in the weeds, because I think that some riders would get caught up on this training outcome, and they keep perfect training logs, and they keep sleep, and they keep this and they keep that, and they get to the top of the hill and they fall off in their race run. And then they get to the top of the hill in the next race and they fall off in your race run. And you're like, you know what? The stuff we've got to worry about is why you're falling off in your race run. Let's not worry about this.
Yeah.
And I think that some people, because they've got maybe a weak area, which they don't feel they can control, they're like, you know what, I'm going to control all the stuff I can control and take huge ownership of it, and almost like turn away from that other stuff and go, oh, forget that. It'll all be fine because I'm doing this, and that will all be fine. But they don't realise that what they're doing here makes no impact on this other side. So trying to understand, like I try and grade almost when people ride. You can almost red, amber, green it. So if you're going out having fun with Bren in Peaslake, that's green. You're having fun. There's no outcome. There's no sort of judgment. You're messing around with your mates.
Yeah.
Then you've got testing. Right, Ollie, we want some feedback on these tyres. Can you tell us what these tyres are like? So you're like, oh, okay, I better think about this a bit more. There's an outcome to this, and that's amber. You're trying to give some out. It doesn't really matter if you come, fast or not, but I've got an outcome. And then you've got red, and that's a race. There's an actual outcome to this event. If you look at, say, juniors or racers, they might spend 90% of their riding time riding green, having fun.
Yeah.
But who cares about that in a race environment? Because you've only got 7 or 8 opportunities on red, these red events, but you're not practicing a red event.
Yeah.
There's no approach to that. So I try and, how can we contrive a red event, so to speak, to make it an outcome? And I try and instill that into the riders to think about that. Let's make this an outcome. Let's have a bet. Let's say that you're going to put your result on social media. You're going to put the times on a chart. Let's say you're going to do something that suddenly makes you go, oh, bloody hell, I better beat him here.
That's a really cool way of putting it, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
We got timing poles before, and it apps, like I spent my whole time bombing down these tracks, thinking, I think in my head, all right, I'm not trying to go that quick, but I'm trying to go quick, right?
Yeah.
And it just changed everything. We got these timing poles up, and I was just like, oh my, like I don't even hit turns in the same way, and I don't.
Yeah. It's brilliant, isn't it? And there's also the flip side. So if you've got timing poles, and I know some people that use timing poles all the time, they never learn. Because they're never giving themselves that green, that opportunity to like, let's try that line.
Yeah.
Let's try nose wheeling for a bit of a lot. No, I can't because it's slower. Because all they're doing is going, I'm racing you. You've got your watch on. I've got my watch on. If Ollie goes faster, he won't care that I've tried a different line. I've just lost.
Yeah.
And so there's 2 sides to it. And I think they're both really important. Understanding where can I learn and get better? Because you won't really learn much in a red environment. You revert to what you know. But at the same time, if your job is to race down a hill and be judged on it, you should be comfortable. Should we not get as comfortable as we can in that environment?
It's a mad job, dude. Because if you think you're adding to something, you're adding to the best in the world at something they've been doing for all of this time, and they've not been training before. Yeah. So they've been training all that time. They've been coached all that time. They've been thinking about it, trying to go the quickest. They're literally trying to go the quickest. That's what they're trying to do.
Yeah.
And then you've got to just come in and just come up with something. It's way more than just 10 reps of this.
Yeah.
Like it's really cool actually hearing you talk about it, because it's like, I don't know. It just
Who's
makes
the athlete you've worked with the longest?
Probably Danny.
Is it? Yeah.
Well, yeah. I worked with Danny for years, from probably 05. I think he was 15 when I started working with him.
Wow.
And then we worked together. He became world champion. I worked with him another year. And then essentially I was approached by the Athertons to come and work for the team. And I wasn't going to be able to do both. And it was quite a difficult decision to make, but it was the only decision you could make. It was such a big machine that was going to give me a full-time job, basically. But then we started up again only quite recently, which was great. So it's in that point of view, it's been, a really nice thing. But I'm quite lucky. I generally I keep my athletes for quite a long time. I don't have many that come for a year and then go, and that's nice, because I try and you build up a relationship with these people. And like we're talking about, I never want to be that guy that writes a training plan, sends it off, and then good luck sort of thing, because I understand that it's so much more than a training plan. Because if you printed my training plan out and looked at it, you might not be very impressed. You might, well, anyone could do that. But that's not the point. It's how it's delivered. It's like what's going to work for that one person, and how does their week evolve, and are they happy, and are they motivated, and are they getting the most from this?
I guess if you were training the Athertons then and now, you've got quite a good comparison. You've actually got loads of good comparisons, haven't you? You've got Ronan and Danny.
Yeah.
And who spends more time in green, who spends more time in red? I mean...
Exactly. These things, I find that's why I'm so lucky, because if you were to look at... One of the things, as you can imagine, I've done is you look at academic studies. You put in downhill mountain bike racing, and then you'd see an academic paper. All right, they've studied it, and then you look. And so often I'd be reading these papers, I did this years ago, and I'd be like... They only got up to that heart rate, or they only got up to that blood lactate, or they only did it. They're not my people. They're not the people I work with. I'm not working with downhill mountain bike races. I'm working with world-class downhill. It's another level. Right. It's the same with anything. If you were to read a paper on 1,500 meter runners, if you're working with the world's best 1,500 meter runners, they probably don't fit into the mold of your club runner.
Yeah.
But because of that, you've got different personalities, and you're trying to understand, because there are commonalities between them. You're like, oh, right, okay, this is normal. And because of that, I'm in an environment that isn't, my workday environment isn't normal. I'm working with very high achieving people who demand a lot, but they all have fun with it. I don't know anyone who doesn't enjoy what they do.
Yeah.
And, I probably Gee's the longest that I've worked with, because, from 2012 all the way through to now, I've known the guy for over 10 years, working with him professionally. And it's interesting to see, I think he's got so much to give as a mentor, to an athlete, because he's been through it. When you see him warming up for a race run, you'd learn so much. It's like he was going to war. And I don't like to use that term flippantly because of how the world is nowadays, but he was for him, this is all that matters. This is all that matters. And I think for some racers, that isn't the case.
Right.
They're quite happy with the clip. Is the clip going to get 100,000 views? Is the sponsor going to make me some sick kit? There's all of these other things that come into it. But when Gee was at the top of that hill, all he wanted to do was win. And to be in that environment, I love that. I absolutely love that. So you can imagine, I'm so excited for Norco, because Greg... he might be nearly as old as me, but all he wants to do is win.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't put it past him. And he's doing everything he can.
Yeah.
And he expects everyone in his environment to be doing the same. If you're sat down not doing what you should be, you'll soon hear about it. Quite rightly too. You've got no business being there. Yeah. So I don't, I'm fired up, because that's what gets me going. That's all I think about.
Oh, it's mega, isn't it? It's elite sport. It's so cool.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think we should really talk about the Norco thing, but just quickly, how does an athlete work with you? How do you actually start? And are you quite selective?
I'm very fortunate in now a lot of people contact me as opposed to me contacting them.
And is it sometimes a team that contacts you, or is it the athlete himself?
So Jobo, for example, contacted me a couple of years ago, and we started working together, and I work with the union guys, and I love that.
Sick.
I love it. And Joe's awesome to work with, and he gives me a lot of control, and I try and feed back to him what they're doing, because again, they're all different characters, so different. And Chris Howes, an absolute wild man, super exciting raw talent, and I'm trying to sort of coax him along. And Lockie's developed so much from being that wild man to being more mature. And then Frida's very analytical, sort of PhD level intellect, but going out with Dakota and living together, and Dakota's the other way. So you're trying to, one thing's not going to work for everyone, but I've been conscious that I can't take on everything that comes to me, because I won't do the job very well.
Yeah.
And that's really tough, because I'm self-employed. You know what I mean? It's it's a simple thing. It's not like British Cycling going, Alan, here's your monthly paycheck. We want you to work with riders. It's so far away from that. So it's trying to get that balance. And I always err on the side of caution, I guess.
Okay.
I prefer to give myself more breathing room, because then I can do the job better. Yeah. There was one year I learned I did it wrong. And I was so stressed, and I worked every Saturday morning just catching up on plans. And I felt as though I was constantly just treading water to give a good service. And I was like, this ain't the way to do it.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to, if, you know, you can imagine if one of these athletes didn't feel as though they've been looked after properly, that's no good for anyone.
No.
You know, so I'd much prefer to work with a few
Don't get
people.
a good Yelp review that way, do you?
Yeah, exactly. Nah. And I never ever want, I'm so self-critical, believe me. Like there'll be conversations I'll have on the phone with my wife where I think I had the worst day in the world and I've not done a good enough job. And she'll be like, I'm sure you've done the best you can. And I'm like, but that's just not good enough.
There's so many things I still want to dig into. Yeah, the Norco deal though, super interesting. So how did this come around, and what does it look like at the moment? Because I think there's a lot of questions around the Norco team, especially throwing the resources that they are at it and
super
having
exciting.
Greg. And so what's it look like for you?
So I've worked with Greg for a number of years, 4 years, something like that. And basically Greg picked up the phone and phoned me and he said, I've been in touch with him and I knew that things were changing, should we say, at Santa Cruz. I don't really want to get into that. That's his discussions to have. But I knew what was going on. And he basically said, look, I want to move teams and I want you to come with me as a team manager. And I said, no. I said, I don't want to be a team manager. I said, that's not what I do. I said, look, I'll write you what I think I'll be really good at doing. I'll write you my job description. You tell me if that fits with what you want. And that's really exciting, isn't it? Because I was like, this is what I think I can really bring to the table. And what was really good was that absolutely fitted in what Greg wants. And that, in Greg's viewpoint, is what a team manager is. Right. It's like, this is what I want. I don't need you to book hotels. I don't need you to book flights. We'll have Kathy Sessler do that. She's assistant team manager. But the decisions that need to be made, the buck stops with you. And that's exciting and petrifying in equal measure, because I think Greg's found that in the past, decisions that are made aren't necessarily performance-based decisions. They're like a logistical decision or a marketing decision maybe, or something like that. And I think he wanted to strip all that away and go, look, we're here for performance. So what needs to happen is it starts and finishes with, is it going to help us get better on the bike? So that's the honour that I have in that team. And I've got Kathy, who's booking all the flights and doing the logistics and dealing with UCI and all of that stuff. And then Tom Duncan is looking after the bikes and the parts and the truck and all of that side. And I'm sort of having discussions with them and then the engineers who, you know, it's really cool. One of them's got like a Formula One background, so it's super analytical and I can tap into that. And at the moment, I'm planning the training camp. So, and I think Greg's quite excited because I'm going to have quite a good structure. I'm going to have a structure. I'm going to say, this is what I want to work towards. These are the outcomes I want to get. Where it deviates from that, no problem.
What's a training camp look like? Like a pre-season, right? Like, so this is like a testing.
Yeah, this is a testing camp as opposed to a training camp. And so what we're trying to do is understand, I'm in the process of trying to understand, one, what do the riders want to get out of it? Because that's the most important thing, isn't it? Do they want bike time? Do they want to change stuff on their bike? Do they want timing to see how they get faster? Do they want feedback on the track? Then you've got what the engineers are trying to do. Are they trying to change something? Are they trying to wheel sizes, geometry, linkage ratio, all of that stuff that is really important, you know, on the bike. And then you've got the mechanics, because some of the mechanics won't have worked with these riders before. And there will be a case of getting to know the rider and understanding. What I've found historically is, if we look at character traits, you've got, I don't know if you read the book Surrounded by Idiots, but it's a fascinating book on character traits, well worth reading. And that's the one book that I felt has explained this really well. And you've got red, who are sort of, I want it now, alpha, very, very goal driven.
Athlete, are we talking about?
Yeah. So you've got this is in all personalities.
Okay,
but
sorry. Right.
So a red personality is commonly found in successful athletes. Then you've got a blue personality that's often quite methodical, data driven, number orientated. Then you've got yellow that's quite creative, but they might go, oh, I like this, and then, oh, I like that, and never necessarily get one thing finished. And then you've got a green personality that are like the worker bees. They're quite happy to be led. They just stay on their furrow. They're quite comfortable with that. And what you find is you get clashes between certain personality types.
Right.
So red and green clash quite a lot. I'm quite red, and I'm like, I need it done now. And then the green's like, yeah, no problem. And and I'm like, no, it's not fast enough for me. And they're like, I've got 10 things to do. And I'm like, yeah, my thing should be at the top, and reflecting on that's good because you understand that you're an impatient bastard and that's not going to get the most out of people. But then I'm quite blue as well. And the reason I'm saying this is quite often mechanics have different personality types to their rider. And so you're trying to stand back and see this. And I have conversations with riders. I won't mention their name, but last year I had a conversation with a rider. I pulled him aside and I said, look, your mechanic is not this way inclined. You're not going to get the most out of him by breathing down his neck or saying you need your bike now. You need to give him his time. If at the end of the day or at the end of the weekend, it's not working, then you need to, again, I guess that's where a team manager comes in. How can we get this relationship to work well? And it's understanding characters. Some of those people I've never met before and we're all being put together. So I'm not trying to judge anyone's character. And there's no good or bad character. Let's be clear. Yeah. There's no good or bad character in this. Just different. Yeah. And how can you work with these people to get the most from them? And I've often seen we need to understand. We had a psychologist come into the Athertons once and it was brilliant. We did this test and you had to do a task. I can't remember exactly what a task was. And you each did it on your own. And then he'd be like, right, now I want you two to pair up. And Ollie, you do the task. Alan's going to stand over and watch you do the task. And then we'd say, did you do it better or worse? And then the next one, right, I now want you to cheer him on. I really want you to get at him. And then it got bigger and bigger and bigger. Gee Atherton, the more people who wanted to see how he got on, the better he did. Some of the mechanics.
Oh man, it's so interesting.
You know what I mean?
love this
The
stuff.
more people... Fucking leave me alone. I'm trying to do my job.
Do you know my both my mum and my girlfriend say they drive badly when I'm in the car, and it's like I don't know what I have about me that is just because I'm not like judgmental or weird about stuff, but I obviously have something about me that's like too intense, too much.
Interested.
Yeah.
Wow.
I love all those tests, dude. I mean, you can just go on forever, can't you?
And all you're trying to do is you're trying to understand the person. And I think ultimately that's all it's about.
Yeah.
Because if I understand, like some riders I work with, they'd be, like Remy Mar-Smith, lovely bloke, super laid back, would be an amazing surfer, pro surfer. And I'm just trying to coax him on his way in this, let's go down this route. But his brother is like the polar opposite, super data driven, really, really intense, very, very, very good at what he does. And I'm often trying to pull him back a little bit. So if you had one, it's not a one size fits all. Their program, you know what I mean? It's going to change for that individual.
Do you know, I think it makes a perfect loop. I was looking for the answer, what kind of psychology, what kind of person you're looking for to suit winning World Cup races. And actually the answer is there is no one anything.
No.
But both physically and mentally, there isn't actually an answer. You're the answer. You make it work yourself, don't you?
Exactly. And what you're trying to do is understand yourself and go, where could I be a bit better? Because what you want to do is be the best version. It sounds awful, really. The best version of you at the top of the hill. So if you are really frighteningly fast on the bike and incredibly skilled, but you're not very strong, you know that if things go sideways, you are at a high risk of getting ejected off that bike and landing in a tree. So shall we work on an insurance policy? Let's not reduce how good you're on a bike, but let's give you this insurance policy. If you're blowing out your ass as soon as it gets to a flat pedal at Maribor and you have to sit down, you've got nothing in you, and then your eyes start starring up as you come around the next two corners for that big jump, we're going to have to work on this cardio side because it's just not good enough.
So there's just isn't an answer, eh?
No.
And the same goes for like what you were saying about the warm-up before the race. Super intense. Equally, there's an answer where you're having a good time and messing around with friends, and then you go into your World Cup run and you win.
Yeah. It's exactly that. And I think that you can be, if we're too much in our comfort zone, we maybe turn off to what makes us... I think we all need a bit of an edge. I think we need to feel as though we're stepping up to something. And sometimes some riders at the top of the hill will go, you know what? It doesn't really matter how I do because I've got a good contract. I'm signed in for 3 years. I've got a good salary. I've got some filming trip that I'm going to be stoked on. It doesn't matter. They will never win. That's the thing, is they won't ever get that final bit because the guy next to him is going to go, I am going to move hell or high water to get down that hill faster than you. And they might be super chilled out, but when it comes to that point, you still need that drive. I don't think it's very common that you'll ever find, and someone will correct me if I'm wrong, but I've never seen a race run that's won where it's super chilled. It's never that like, super chilled.
Yeah.
They might say I could have done it all day long.
Rat looked chilled. Rat used to look chilled, didn't he?
He did.
I'm not saying he was.
No,
but
he'd be a really I'd say he'd be fascinating one to discuss, because he would be loose and he would be on the edge, but he wouldn't look like it. And his crashes, like I remember seeing one of his crashes, and it made me really upset to see it, because he was like, it was like a whimper when he hit the rocks. It was like one of those crashes where I just felt really sad, because he was whimpering in the rocks, and I was like, he just wants his mum, it's that sort of, we've all been there, haven't we? I don't want to be here, I just want to be at home, safe. And that's like, you only get to that point if you're pushing. You know what I mean?
Absolutely, I think it's interesting that the way the tracks have gone as well, you see a lot more, it feels on edge, doesn't it? Like I guess you just watched a hard line.
Yes.
How fast did that look? And like the last section, we talk about motorways, like compare that motorway to Fort William, it's like there's another 4 lanes, isn't there? Like it's wide and fast and
moto.
Isn't it? It's like you've got to be going after it and mega strong.
You've got to, I can only imagine what it's like. I've got so much respect for the girls who are at that event, because to step up and go, I'm going really into the unknown here. Like, I think it would be fair to say that the girls are going way more into the unknown than the boys on that track. And for them to go, right, let's go. We don't really know how this is going to turn out. And they pushed and they got up and they pushed and they got up and they kept going. You can see how good these riders are. And also, it's not just a physical well done, it's that attitude of going, I'm going to send it off this. Watching the head cam of one of those jumps, it wasn't the most impressive of jumps, but it was completely blind. Like, they took off and it was almost like a bush in front of them, and then they had to pick a landing.
I know the exact one you mean. It looked close to trees on the right.
That's it.
Yeah,
you were like, whoa. And I watched a head cam, I think Matt Jones put one up, and it was slippy. And you could just tell he was like, I've got to get down this in one piece. And I'm thinking, we've all been there. Your tyres clog up with that clay mud. I'm thinking, how are you going to send it off you've got to be committed off these jumps. So how much your brain plays like an important, it sounds fucking ridiculous, but like, okay, your mindset plays an important part is insane in downhill, I think. Like, I knew when Jackson came off, I knew that Bernard would hear that. Yeah,
and I knew that when Bernard heard that, I knew information-wise, that's just him saying, okay, the track's still wet. Yeah, if Jackson comes off, Jackson's dialed.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I tell you what, I wrote to him to say bad luck on second or whatever, and I wrote exactly that, just in like a question way, like, I must have been crap hearing Jackson's come off at the top, and then he just like repeated it. And so obviously it's easy, it's a friend of mine, so I know what it is, but how crazy that is, that it is just your brain. It is just like you're sat there. Like, I almost think you want to be like headphones, blinkers. It's literally like blinkers at the top of a race.
Are some riders like that though?
Yeah, it's funny you say that.
So I want to know.
Some of them want to know. A lot of them don't. Andy, I can't remember that. I'm sure there was a situation with Andy where he was like, he wanted to know something, and it was so much pressure to give him the information, because I was like, man, if he's making a decision off a 2-dimensional thing. And I remember being really unhappy with some of the footage, because I hadn't got it. Someone had filmed something. I was like, dude.
So is this like whether a corner's been
blown
exactly.
out, which line or what corner? And I remember seeing the footage go onto the chat, and I was like, no, that's not good enough. He can't make a decision based on what you've just told him.
You don't want to cause confusion before a race.
Delete that and either give him something right or don't give him anything, or give him verbal feedback and just say you're fine. And 9 times out of 10, they're fine. But some riders will walk down the track, and this always astonishes me. They'll walk like, where's a good example of this? Leogang, the first corners in Leogang. It's like they've got this like 180 berm that's really tight, and then it's off camber, and there's like 3 or 4 different goat track ruts basically. And some of the riders were like walk down, watch some people. And when you think about it, the riders that are doing that, if you're top 10 in the world and you're doing that, you might be watching the 55th place guy come and do that, or you might watch a junior. Like, what information are you gaining from this?
Yeah.
It's real risky, but I think they're strong enough mentally to go, I don't care the guy's just crashed, that's the right line. Yeah. Or I'm not going to do it that way. They just want to see something really specific. I would just be trying to watch my helmet cam, like get that into it and go, well, I'm going to stick to that. But nowadays, the track's changing between the last practice run. Like the juniors, for example, there'd be 7 hours of practice before the elites got onto the track. And then they'd go on the track and then the juniors would come on. And you'd have essentially B lines that would have been ridden in, like a suboptimal line sometimes. Then the elites will come on, put their line in, and then a junior would come on the track, having not seen the progression of the track, and it'd be another world. And it was so dangerous. And they've ended up changing. I was feeding back. I'm as part of this like trackside committee, safety committee thing, and that was one of my. I was like, this is deadly. Right. These guys are coming in full gas, but there's a line that's changed, or mud has been moved onto a rock because they're now using a different line. And it's you want the information, but then you want to trust yourself that you're completely in the right.
I never know what to say at races. I hate it. With my friends, especially close friends,
it's hard,
I never know what, and I know them so well, but I never know what.
That gondola ride.
Dude, what am I meant to do on it? What are you meant to do? Do fart jokes? You know what I mean?
You know what?
Because I don't know what the reality actually is.
9 times out of 10, they don't want anything. They're quite happy.
Yeah.
But some, like, I know Nigel Reeve used to chat with Stevie at the top and keep it light. And he was like really active with that. And he was really good at it. I'd be seeing them, I'm like, how are you doing this? Because I knew Nigel so well.
What's your favourite colour?
Yeah.
Come in with something lame, some lame chat. God, you seen the news today?
I know.
Weather's nice, isn't it?
That'd be me in the gondola. Like my wife's like, Alan, you're so awkward in situations like that.
No.
Yeah, she'd be like, you'd end up touching their knee by mistake or something. You know what I mean? Or holding their hand or something. And sometimes
going for a kiss.
Yeah. Inappropriate.
Mixed signals. Sorry. Well, I'm nervous.
But I'd sometimes just go, like, I'd ask them, do you want to just go up on your own? I feel bad for the mechanics. Yeah, I think it'd be a hard job for a mechanic. Because again, we've just been talking about this personality trait. If your mechanic is forced into that situation,
dude,
they might be like, oh, bloody hell. Some of them are great and they keep it light. That one of the mechanics on the Athertons is like just a massive piss taker. And he's somehow got this balance of being complete piss taking knob to amazingly professional mechanic.
Yeah.
And he's got it perfect. Like, I've got nothing to criticize him on.
That's
because
the dream.
He knows that he can have a laugh, do a fart joke, pull his pants down, and have the rider just chilled and laughing.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the rider's got ultimate trust that when it comes to it, right, race run's 5 minutes late, start your warm up now. I'm going to put the muds on. I've put the mud hugger on. I've done this. I've done that. You're absolutely fine. See you at the bottom. Fist bump and he's gone.
That's mega smart as well. Because if you're smart enough to get into the bit, you're one-way smart.
Yeah,
exactly.
But then to know when to get out of the bit and to stop and to not be like, I want more rewards. I want people to laugh more. Is I think super hard, eh?
It's intelligence, isn't it? That's surely that's intelligence. And it's something that is often overlooked because people look at intelligence as book smarts.
Yeah.
And that's not necessary intelligence.
No.
It's how you can convey that information.
What other sports do you look at for inspiration for training? Because I'm sat here thinking you're like the Aldon Baker of mountain bike or downhill. So yeah, I'd be interested.
That's the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me.
Should we start again and we'll do that as the intro?
So I look at motocross a lot.
Really, yeah.
Yeah, just out of interest, really.
I'd say that we spoke earlier about. You used the example for like everyday people about being in. You need to get in some sort of program, or you need to have some sort of structure to race. Some sort of structure to your training. And the moto thing to me is really interesting. It's like race Saturday, day off Sunday, back at it Monday.
They've
Tuesday,
got
Wednesday,
really
travel
good,
Thursday.
Yeah.
That's although it looks like it's a burnout at the end of the year because they're usually all knackered by the end of the outdoors. But I do think that what they're doing seems to be the right way.
What works really well, and we sort of alluded to it earlier with the skills coaching, is it's in a really defined environment.
Yeah.
So you've got these facilities, like the Baker's factory, you've got the gym there, you've got the track there, you've got accommodation, you've got the workshop, it's all there. So you turn up for work, you do your job, and then you go home. In the UK, I feel so bad for the motocross boys who have to travel to Fat Cats, for example, from down south, and it's like a 4-hour drive and all of this. You can't get into that same flow. There's just too many hours in a van.
Yeah.
But what they're able to do is they've got this really nice scheduling, and that works really well. And I think what I'm interested is how, don't you think that sounds a bit like this racehorse trainer? He's put all the best guys, you know what I mean? He's put his best guys in one environment.
Yeah.
He knows that the fastest horse will always want to stay out front and everyone's going to chase him. And if you can get the buy-in of that, the alpha, and say, look, trust me, and then everyone else will trust me, then you can get something that's really, really good. So
no one's done that in mountain biking.
No.
It's not a thing, is it? There's not a facility.
Isn't. And it comes down to the facility. I'd say that the most likely facility for that would probably be Dovey.
Yeah.
You know, you could see that developing in that way, but still it's in the middle of nowhere, really, you know, to get to.
Yeah.
And these motocross facilities maybe are in the middle of nowhere, but you've probably got, you know, a town and more life around, but they're building that life in McCunliffe. So it is maybe that sort of place.
Interesting to think,
yeah, I think,
Milway factory or something.
Oh, can you imagine? I there was a time when I was looking at getting a facility, but I realised that you could only be in one place. Yeah. And that was a lot of my job is travelling a lot.
So you don't have a gym that you work out of?
I work out of a number of gyms. I've got
you mentioned
really
lab
good
before.
Yeah, so I work at the University of Birmingham. They've got a high performance centre, and I'm really lucky. I've got a great relationship with them, and it allows me to access. I've basically got peer review every time I'm in the room.
Wow.
You know, I've got physiotherapists there, I've got a physiologist there, I've got really clever strength and conditioning coaches who I've known for years, and I'll often bounce ideas off them. And there's one guy in particular who doesn't think, he's nothing like me, completely opposite personality. So when I've got a problem, he's the guy I go to.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I don't go to the guy who's going to think the same way as me, because he's going to tell me, no, it doesn't work. Yeah, I knew you'd say that. So I go to him, and I find that brilliant. Yeah. And he works in lots of different sports, and in a way I quite like the fact that he's got no preconceived knowledge of mountain biking. He's just looking at that problem. So from other sports, I think elite sport is probably the best way to look at it. So I've read a lot of books on the All Blacks, for example. Like, their culture is really interesting, and the way they go about things, and you can see a lot of their gym sessions, they're published,
right,
and that's quite interesting.
Okay.
But the way they go about that,
dude,
yeah,
I'm watching the drive to what they called boombox, echo box, the boombox. The Drive to Survive creators have made a Six Nations.
Oh yeah,
I've not watched that yet.
Oh mate,
yeah.
Like the weight that they lift is absolutely. Like, I gave up thinking about weight as, you know. I remember when I was first in the gym, I was worried about what I was lifting. People would think around me when I was younger. You know, it's like when I was like 18 or something, and then when you realise that you're just not the same creature.
Yep. Exactly.
Like, it is absolutely wild what
really
they're lifting. They're lifting after games.
Really?
They're like back squatting 200 kg.
It's incredible, isn't it?
After games.
Yeah.
You know? What on earth, man? Like,
wow.
And that's what, again, I think this sort of understanding of what is elite. Like, I was in the gym just the other day, and I was at the university, and there was a lad in there, tall lad, quite lean, but really broad-shouldered. Didn't know him from Adam, and he was in there with his coach, and I was doing my thing, and he puts on this weights belt, and he had like 40 kilos, I think, on the weights belt. Now, I immediately knew, he's going to do a max rep chin up. He's going to try and do a chin up with this on. And so I was like, I'll keep my eye open for him. He was repping it out. Bang, bang. I was like, who the hell is this kid? I had no idea who he was. And so after, you know, the gym session, I went to the guy, I was like, who's that? And I'd heard of him. He's a swimmer who's going to be like in the Olympics this year, and he's at the university. And I was like, elite's elite. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter what you do, because that's an exercise I would use, and I've got these benchmarks for what I think is good. But talking about rugby, actually, so one of the piece of equipment they use, and you'll have seen on this program, is between their shoulder blades, they've got this little box. There's like a little accelerometer and it logs all their data.
Right.
So they can tell heart rate from it, they can tell impact from it, the G forces, they can tell acceleration, deceleration. And last year I worked with that company to reprogram one for downhill.
Oh, mate. This was a question I was going to ask you, because you do crazy Gs and you know what an average human weighs. So therefore you know what they need to be able to bench press, right?
Well, you can boil it down to understanding that. It's like, what do we need to tolerate? And that's one of the questions I had, because I felt as though a rider was going off and I was like, we've done all this work that's been quite carefully thought about, and then you're just going to ride your bike with your mates. And I was trying to understand it. And years ago, like where this first came about was I was doing a sprint session with G in the build up to the season. And then after a couple of weeks, he was like, "Oh, I'm knackered from doing these sprints." And I was like, "Really?" Then I don't get it. And he was like, "Yeah, I'm doing that much on the downhill bike." And I was like, "I don't get this." So we put some power cranks on his downhill bike. We managed to get some power cranks made up for the downhill bike. And I said, "Look, all I want you to do is please press start and then press stop." And anyway, I remember him going off and riding and then coming back, and I didn't believe what I'd seen. So I did a day with him. I was like, "Look, I just need to be here for the day. Just let me do it." And basically he was doing a sprint session as part of his downhill. So every sprint, like his first 5 seconds were like 1800 watts every time he set off for a run. And I was like, well, why am I bothering doing that round on a flat road? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You've got that covered.
So he's doubling up.
He's doubling out. I was just wearing him out.
Yeah.
But I would never have known that unless I got this insight. So that gave me a really interesting insight into what he was doing. Now, I'm not saying everyone's like that.
Pardon the pun.
Yeah, what? And that sort of got me so I've taken blood tests at the end of a race run. What's their lactate at? And you'll have seen a rowing event in the Olympics. They cross the line and they literally just collapse. Yeah. They're at sort of 18 to 20 millimoles. Charlie at Fort William was 90 millimoles. So do you see what I mean? We're at that level of exertion, but Charlie's got to negotiate rocks and roots and massive jumps.
That's so
He
cool,
can't just shut his eyes and do it. So the exertion's there. And then I was trying to get my head around the load that was going through the rider. And also, what makes a better race run? Is a better racer or better race run someone who can tolerate more load, or someone who's smooth enough to reduce the overall load?
Watching Jackson, I would say the latter.
Yeah, reduce that overall impact.
Watching Danny, I would say the latter.
So this is fascinating. So I got all this data, and again, it's like I've got data from Fort William of Charlie, of Greg. We had that on there, and we had the first. It was brilliant because Stat Sports were fantastic to work with, and I sort of managed to. I bought the system, I bought the software, and then I got into conversations, and they just couldn't help me. Like the support staff just couldn't help me, and then I went onto LinkedIn and I searched out the sports scientist behind it, and then I got in touch with him and he was like, "Oh yeah, you this won't work for you. You need this. You need what the pro footballers they used completely different software."
Right.
Oh, okay. So then I did more testing, and he's like, "How fast are your guys going?" And so that I explained, 50k an hour quite commonly, and he's like, "Oh, right, yeah, we're going to need to reprogram this for you." So then they took the speed cap off it, and then we got more data, and then he was able to help me analyze it, but it was 2D, so we weren't able to match it with where they were on track very easily. And all of these things, like for me, it's such an exciting puzzle to be a part of. And
it's a very complicated one, isn't it?
Really
Downhill is very complicated.
Really complicated.
Because same track and different weather conditions.
There you go. Yeah, so all of this was different. So I was just trying to get an understanding, and then we went to Fort William National, and I got a lot of riders to wear this unit. I was running around like a blue-ass fly trying to get the data and log the data, and right, now I've got it. And then I know a guy who works for Red Bull's Formula One team who's a data engineer, and so he can help me analyze it. And he went into some wild. He was able to help me view it in a way that I could make sense of, and we could see some of the speed traces where Greg was really good in catching Charlie, but where Charlie was actually better because he didn't slow down as much.
Okay,
and then we could see the peak Gs, and we could see the different axes. So you've got X, Y, and Z. If you think about it, the three axes, and you've got trying to resist yourself being bucked over the bike. You've got the lateral being pushed off the side of it, which we don't get much of. And then you've got the load that's basically trying to squash you down onto the floor. And it was really like, right, where's the load coming from? And a lot of it was trying to resist yourself being thrown over the bars, which you would make sense. But also the landings, like you were peaking at 4 to 5 times body weight. And then what we were trying to do is understand the cumulative time, because these things are only fractional. So if you talk to a fighter pilot, they might be at 6G, but they're sustaining 6G, for, like holding on, trying not to black out. Mountain bikers may get to that, but it's fractional. So we're trying to understand, like, how long over a race run are you actually getting that load? And then how can I maybe adapt you for that load?
Right.
So this is stuff that, yeah, this goes through my head, and like, it's really funny. I used to read books on this stuff in the evening, and I now read Jack Reacher books because I never got to sleep. I now need to like,
on all the time.
I was like on, and I'd wake up in the night and I have a notebook by my bed, and I'd be like, my wife's like, what the hell are you doing? I've got this idea.
God, it's so interesting though, isn't it?
And I was like, I've got to now wind down. So now all I want to read about is Jack Reacher turning up and causing havoc and then going away again.
It now comes to the point where it's like F1, where they do so much training on the sims. Like, imagine a sim good enough that you could ride downhill at race pace. Like,
well, have you seen Red Bull have got like a sim for skiing, and it's like this, it's incredible thing. It's like a platform that goes up and down, and they're trying to resist into it, and yeah, it's really, really interesting stuff. So it's not
all they've got to do
necessarily
is the ski one, hold handlebars.
yeah, I know. But
Same.
it's that loading. It's like an eccentric load is essentially what you're trying to understand, and then you're trying to work out, how do I program for it? Do I just try and replicate it, or do I do the stuff that underpins it? Because I don't want you looking like you're riding a mountain bike in my gym necessarily, because that's what you do way better on a bike.
On a bike,
Yeah.
So you're always, you know, and often someone might not, so some of my riders might be like, I had no idea you did any of that stuff, because it's not stuff you bombard. Like, some athletes will be fascinated. Some athletes are like, I don't care. Do I put 120 on the bar? Do I put 140 on the bar? Just tell me what I need to do and I'll do it. So you're just, again, how do you get the most out of the, you know, the guy or girl you're working with?
Yeah.
Oh, I love it that you've done that though. That's
Yeah,
so
it's
cool hearing
fascinating.
about that.
Do you think there's a future in all that stuff for you and that
So
company?
I'm now working with another company, because we almost got to the end of like what I could do with this piece of equipment and my knowledge. And I've got another, like, Red Bull have been amazing with this. Like, I've got to give credit where it's due. There's a small group of people there who are really supportive of what I do, and they allow me to do this stuff and to go to some, like, I was at some events last year just to do this, you know, to get the information and try and work it out.
Yeah.
And I've now found another piece of software that we can, another piece of hardware that we can use that basically it's got a gyroscope within it, so it'll always find true north. Because one of the problems with the stat sport is it doesn't find true north. So the more you lean over, the more it confuses X with Y and Z and all the rest of it. So all of this stuff is mental. Like, and I'm a novice at it. Like, I hope no one thinks watching this that I know what I'm talking about. This is purely like, I'm
Well,
not,
it's fascinating,
you know, I'm
isn't it?
just working on it and trying to understand.
What do you feel like you're working towards?
A better understanding of the demands of the sport. That's all. I just want to understand what you go through.
But it sounds like what you could imagine getting out of it is advice for an athlete on how they should ride. That's what I think is interesting about it.
Yeah, because as well, being self-employed, there has to be some sort of,
Yeah.
not business, but there has to be a,
Oh yeah, I hadn't thought that. What I'd just sort of thought that the data that you get. I mean,
I'm not saying you're doing it to hold it to ransom, but that is useful to you as a business.
I've never thought of it like that. Honestly,
Okay.
I've never ever thought. To me, that's CPD, like continued
Yeah.
professional development. That's all I think of it as. I used to have to write. I still have to do it for this certain accreditation I've got. I've got to put together like the professional development I've done over a 2 or 3 year block. And I remember having these massive arguments with these idiots who were assessing me, and they were like, "Well, that's not relevant." I'm like, "What do you mean?" I remember I was invited to Red Bull's Formula One factory, and I spent the day with them. I literally was the most inspired, motivated individual. And I remember having that as part of my CPD, and they said it's irrelevant for your job. And I was like, I have no interest in this accreditation. You can take my accreditation.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? What more do you want from someone to get this sort of information? And with this, I'm just trying to understand the demands. I think you can, having looked at overlaid traces of a former world champion and the current world champion, and having the resultant race run result on that one track, I can see why one rider beat the other, and I know why they beat the other.
Right.
So,
it comes down to technique, doesn't it?
And also
That's
exactly
so
that.
interesting. If you can say you ride, whatever it is, you ride over the front. This guy's a flats rider. You'll be able to see it in data form. That's insane.
Yeah, but
I love that.
But you've got to be careful.
So
You've got to be careful how you feed it back, because the last thing, can you imagine? I go to Greg with this data. Right, I've got this data from Charlie, and he's better on you at this section. You need to improve. And he's like, well, how?
But dude, maybe that is the next step. In Formula One, they're like, you're too early on the brakes in turn 3. They're just like that. And then the driver is like, yeah, I'll give it a go. I'll try and brake later. Like, maybe that is the next thing that makes it.
And I know that's something that the data, like the Norcos have all got a really good data system on them. And that's where they're developing that bike. And that's something we've wondered about.
Yeah.
Is it worth having like a brake sensor on there? But one of the big things that downhillers as a sport has struggled with, I think, is, we talk about coaching, never had coaching. The only coach I thought who could have really done something and never did was Neil Donoghue, because he was back at that point. Now, I'm not negating any other skills coach, don't get me wrong at all. But back then, maybe 2015, maybe 2016, something like that, Donny had moved away and he was doing stuff for one of these channel, GMBN. But he was still doing stuff on the bike. He was doing a bit of coaching. And I really thought that he was the guy who'd be able to really be that man, because no one could question his performance on a bike. I feel as though if I'd have gone up to one of those boys back then and said, you need to do it like this, they'd have gone, you can't beat me. I can beat you.
But that's what's interesting about that rugby thing. Is that it's not about your opinion. It's just
there
about
you go.
So if you can put it out on a graph and you can be like, look, what we're finding is in these sections, Peter's body position where he's more over the front, it brings him out of the turn quicker, whatever it is, whatever that piece of information is. As a rider, I'd be like, interesting.
Yeah.
I'd still be pissed off, but I'd be like, might try
and also
ride
going
the
back
front.
to Aldon, there's loads of footage of him telling Cooper
and he doesn't
Webb,
even ride. I know, exactly.
Your foot position's off in the whips, mate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's never in a
Webb, you'd be
motorsport.
like,
Exactly.
fuck you.
And this sort of circles back to what you were saying about skills coaching, because if you talk about skills coaching and you're like, how would you put it into play? It's quite hard to do. It's a long track.
Yeah.
Well, if you've got that data, hey, let's go up and session some stuff. I'll film you, change your body position. We're not trying to go faster.
Probably that thing is maybe the key to improving someone's race run.
And maybe it's a way of helping the rider trust that what you're saying has validity to it.
I'll be honest, I've always struggled a bit with skills coaches. When you see a skills coach that can't ride, or maybe not can't ride, rides to a low level, it's very difficult, I think. I would probably struggle to hear someone who I don't consider at a good level of riding. Would you?
Yeah, totally agree. 100%.
It's stupid because you can just look at it objectively and not be able to do it yourself.
Well, I think it's your bias as a human. It's sort of the inbuilt ego. Like, well, how are you going to tell me to be better because I'm better than you?
It's exactly that. But
It
then
happens
also
in other
that is
sports.
valid, isn't it?
It's completely valid. And when you think about some of the best coaches, like going back to Aldon Baker and him telling Cooper Webb to, do X, Y, and Z, he's never ridden a bike before. He doesn't profess to be a good motocross rider, but they've built trust and in that when he tells them something, there's foundation to it. And when you work with a high level athlete, that's the long and the short of it.
Yeah.
If I dream up something, and there'll be quite often I'll try stuff. I'll be like, can we try this? Let's try this. And sometimes I'll get buy-in with it. And sometimes I'm like, what the hell are we doing? I'll be like, okay, that's cool. No problem. Thank you for trying. And they're not just going to do it.
Yeah.
And there's some stuff that you'll try to see whether it's going to work. But with skills coaching, you have to be clear, like we were saying, if you're going to input something to an elite athlete, a high level racer who's way better than you on a bike, And we sometimes sit in track walks. You'll be walking the track, and I had a situation actually where it was with Bernard. So it was at Leo Gang or Lenside. I think it was Lenside. And the track had changed, and you sort of came left out of the first turn, and then it opened up, and then it went right round some rocks. And on the left-hand side, there was this massive, like, dumping ground of rocks. And Bernard was on his vlog, and he was, you know what he's like, all of this. And he's like, "Oh, Milway, where are we going to go here then?" And I said, "Well, I reckon you're going to jump those rocks and go wide and then through there." No chance. And he was, I don't know whether he's taking a mick. He was like, "Don't be stupid. Literally, don't be stupid." And he carries on talking to the camera, whatever. And I remember just going,
vlogging away.
And I remember just going, I know nothing. Like, I know nothing. What am I going to input? Literally, I thought that was the line. What have I got to input? So I remember walking the rest of the track. Where are we going to go here? I was like, don't know. Like, really, like...
Really dejected?
Don't know. Really dejected. Don't know. Not sure. Like, keeping all my opinions to myself, just trying to watch what was happening. And then I remember going up for A practice, and within 10 minutes, everyone on that line. And I was like, thank goodness me. I was like, I just wiped my brow. I was like, phew. Right, okay, here we go. We're back on it. Yeah. It's 15 years not wasted.
Yeah.
And it's that sort of, you're trying to understand what's happening, but then a mechanic will be on the run. Sometimes we'll be on track walk, and a mechanic will be like, "Well, can you jump that?" And the rider's just like, "Shut up." You know what I mean? No,
okay, yeah.
It's not, don't. And you're trying to balance it, because I think sometimes some people, whoever they may be, might go, "Oh, I might be able to help here. Let's throw in some information into the pot."
Yeah.
And someone was talking about, there's a line in Lords, and you come down this flat out, quite flat straight, and then you have to slow up to get into this bus stop, and then it goes up down a wall. And I remember someone suggesting you jump, and and I remember going, I wish you hadn't said that, because it just, the rider was like, don't want to hear it. You know what I mean? They're just like, go away. This is just stupid. And it sort of can take away from what you're trying to do, because you want to get a feeling from the rider. I try and keep my mouth shut a lot of the time. What's the rider thinking? Where are they going to gravitate to? But then if you're going to make an input with a technical thing, you've got to be quite clear it's going to make, Andy Kolb's got a great phrase for it. You say, I think you should do this. Not possible. That's it. Not possible.
Really?
No, okay, fair enough.
I'm proper stuck thinking about your thing on the back. I am. I'm just thinking how much you could actually learn. Like the idea. I always love the idea of the perfect run. They put the fastest one through each section together and create the perfect run. Just, I don't know, if you have a team of 3 riders, just being able to take like the perfect run out of those 3 and then just be like, just pump that bit a bit more.
I'll tell you
how do you know? Just says it on the graphs, mate. I'm not being a knob about it. Just pump that bit a bit more. It says it on the graphs.
But what's most interesting is we've done that for the year. So I've got that for the whole year. So we've ranked the riders and their splits. And it's consistency that pays. It's not just 1, 1, 1, 1. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And again, that's why this sport is just the best.
Yeah.
Because if you see Bruni and he's like 8th, 5th, 4th, 3rd, 8th, 5th, 4th, 3rd, but that's the winning overall, you know what I mean? You're like, interesting. So what are we trying to,
we're trying to win races?
Yeah. You're trying to be consistently at the top.
Sustainably consistent.
Sustainably consistent.
But then when you look at, you have to dig a layer deeper, because say split 1 is 30 seconds. You might be 8th at split 1, but like 1% slower. And that's where things can get lost. It's understanding where the key sectors are. And as long as you're in touch on the other ones, where's that key sector? He's won that one. Right. That's where he's made the difference. So some of these, Charlie's notoriously slow at starting, and it's really hard to build back from that. And Danny was always, it's a big intent to be, right, let's try and win the first split, because that sets the tone for the run. And so with different riders, when you start to understand how they are, you're trying to build into the run, or you're trying to go full gas and then hang on tight.
Yeah.
So these things, you need to be guided by them, but not led by them.
Okay.
You can get really caught up, and then the tail's wagging the dog a little bit.
Yeah. I can see that. Even interesting, just thinking it sets the tone. Like it's like sets the tone for who? Sets the tone for Danny. That's all it needs to set the tone.
Yeah.
And it's like if you go start telling people to pump out corners, it might be well annoying. Equally, it could be cool. I think that the advice stuff is really difficult to give good advice. It's really, really hard.
It's really difficult. And also it's difficult to listen to advice.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to take advice.
Yeah.
Because I've said the difference between an amateur and a professional. If two people walk into the room with the same problem and you tell them the same information, the person that makes that change and has improved because of it will be the pro rider. It's 9 times out of 10, they're the one who actually actions what you've said to them to do. And the amateur rider might come back to you with the same issue. Well, have you done what I've said for you? Yeah, I did it for a bit and then it wasn't... And you're like, well, you haven't really taken my advice. And I'm not saying you have to listen, like, don't listen to me, listen to whoever, but actually listening to advice is quite difficult. Yeah. And I'm the same. If someone advises me to do it, I have to really think, but I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. Why should I take your advice? I don't want to do that.
Yeah, and you can give advice and it can be the correct answer, but it can not create the correct response. I'm trying to think of an example. Open up that corner. I might open up way too much.
Yeah.
I probably would, in fact. I'm a bit dramatic.
Yeah.
So I might open up way too much, hit a stump, it negates it. It negates it. So.
Or you've slowed up to set up for it that much that actually the
Think about it
advantage
too
of
much.
doing
Yeah,
it
yeah,
is
yeah.
like, oh, here we go, we've lost that. And we do quite a lot of overlay stuff and video analysis to try and understand where potentially is someone making time up, but then understanding that if you look at like a G style rider who just whacks into stuff as hard as possible and then shoots out versus like a Laurie or a Jackson who are like jackrabbits down the track always changing line, the advice for one might not work for the other, their style of riding, because someone can just hang on to that rough, or even the bike, just understanding that whole thing.
What a difficult puzzle you have to deal
Isn't
with.
it?
Yeah. Where do you think it's going? What's the future of downhill? Very broad question, but obviously you think about it because you're running a team.
I don't know. I think I could tell you where I want it to go.
Please. I'd love to hear that first and foremost.
I don't want it in the Olympics.
Okay.
I don't want snow biking in the Olympics. Sorry.
That's fair enough. It's good to get out of the
Did you
system.
change Danny's training for the snow bike?
Did loads
You
of
know
ice
what?
bars.
Cold exposure.
I think it's worth saying everyone I spoke to did enjoy it. I do think
I'm
it's
sure it
worth
is
saying
fun.
that.
I didn't see it. Where did you see it?
I think there was one little video on something.
That's all I saw. The tiny little... Yeah.
And I saw a couple of clips that had been done on social. But we digress. Let's not go down snow biking monologue.
In case it becomes popular and it becomes our jobs. Okay, understood.
We'd have to edit this quite
2
heavily.
years later, we're in a
for
log
future
cabin.
sponsorship obligations.
2 years later, in a log cabin in the Alps.
Yeah, I know. Hey
Brilliant.
guys,
Love
this is the
mountain
best.
biking. The future
know,
of mountain
I
biking,
know.
despite all the snow melting.
I think I'd like to see it as like mainstream TV. I think would be a huge asset to us because I think it lends itself to that. I think people can get excited about it. I think it's a sport where you don't have to ride a mountain bike to enjoy it. I don't think you have to, you don't have to know anything about it. It's a time trial down a hill, but instead of it being a ski time trial where, let's be honest, on the face of it, it doesn't look that difficult. You know what I mean? When you see someone skiing down a ski run, it doesn't convey the steepness.
No, you're right.
It doesn't convey how rough it is unless you're really looking at the skis chattering or you've got awareness as a skier. It just looks fast. But you watch downhill, bloody hell, you can see that's a big jump. You can see that's rocky. You can see they've had to slow up and the bike's bouncing them down the track. So I think from that point of view, it lends itself to TV really well. And I'd love to see, it's going to sound cliched, but if we had outside sponsorship come in, a bit like road cycling, it wouldn't be the Norco factory team. It would be Coca-Cola or whatever, or, whoever, Liquid Death. Some team would have the name behind it and they'd be bringing in the money. And then it would allow you to maybe develop the sport more, have these bases in Europe, travel more, have training camps where you've got tracks set up more consistently, wider tracks. Because in the UK, we've got so few downhill tracks.
Yeah.
With revs going, we're really limited there. Everyone's got to travel. And then you travel and we can't go to the Alps because there's sometimes snow there in the winter and we've got to go somewhere else. So I'd love to see it more mainstream. I don't know the TV package. I'm really the wrong person to ask about it because I never see it. I'm always I'm the other side of it. So a lot of people will message me and say, oh, that looked really good, or that didn't, or this commentary was good, or this wasn't. And I find that interesting because I'm not the consumer of it.
Okay.
But it is your product also.
Exactly.
It's so weird, isn't it?
You don't watch it back? Rare or?
I will watch runs back, but I'll never watch you never get the feeling for the whole thing. You'll watch runs back, but I've seen all those runs a million. Like, it's really weird, the stuff that I'll see on track that you never see on the... If you watched that line, I'll be like, I got that wrong. And you won't, no, he did it fine because he did it like everyone else. And you'll be like, no, he's done that better in practice. Or you've seen it 30 times. So you never get the same feeling watching it back.
Okay.
So from that point of view, it is a weird thing.
I'm optimistic about the TV package for next year. I don't know why. I just saw some stuff, read some stuff about this new Fox conglomerate that have come together to put all sport, like the NBA will be on the same sports network as downhill.
Yeah.
Which I think's good.
Yeah.
I'm going to get probably told in the comments that I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that the NBA, NHL is all going to be this Fox Sports thing, which is good, I think.
I'd like to feel as though it's the sort of sport where you, instead of putting the football on at 1:30 or 2:30 match or whatever time the lunchtime kickoff is, you could put downhill on. Yeah. And if we can get to that, I think you'd engage an audience. How that looks, because I think it is a one and done. I think that's what makes downhill so good. I think that sometimes the semi-final, I'm not sure really how that works because the riders, it's just another full gas race run.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite hard for them. It's just a lot more risk.
Yep.
But the outcome, no one cares about. No one. It's just where you top 30 because you move through. But we do need to work out how to do that. And then the number of riders, I guess I'm traditionalist. I like quite a lot of people there, and then it funnels down because it gives this grassroots element to the sport. Yeah. We're not Formula One. I want people to turn up and try and get down the track and then qualify as a privateer. And we've seen like Jamie Edmondson getting that factory ride was because of that approach from that privateer.
The feeders aren't set up right
exactly.
yet, are they?
The feeders aren't set up. And I think the IXS Cup will go that way. And I think if we had feeder series working, brilliant. But my worry is for example, Red Bull Hardline, if that developed into a series, that's not a feeder series. It's just a competition.
Thing, yeah.
And then all of a sudden you've got, hang on, Red Bull riders, we need the Red Bull riders to be doing this series, but that's the week before this. There's a high risk of injury. Where's the focus?
Yeah, it's a really valid point.
I was going to ask you that when you were talking about putting the team camp together and how you're going to do that, and also getting an athlete to peak. If we have more races, especially with the season getting pushed back now, 2 months or something. Yeah. You've had Hardline, you've got Crankworx coming up, you got this, you got that.
There's a lot of travel.
Where do you get the bike dialed and the this and the that and be in the same place? Because everyone's doing stuff all over.
So that was one of the big things is trying, can we get in the same place? And some of the riders, I think Gracie would have been, like, she'll have been to New Zealand and to Australia and back. And then Lucas would have been down there and across and back. And, Greg's been here, there and everywhere. So it is hard to get that balance right. And it is tough because we've got this gap in the middle of the year because of the Olympics. So there's all of these things that you're trying.
Is that this year?
Yeah, we've got all that coming in. So there's a bit of a gap in the later summer where things can be changed. And Fort William being first race, normally we have the national beforehand where everyone turns up at Fort William. Now we don't. So there's not many pre-season races. I don't think Riola National is going to be good prep for Fort William, for example. It's not. It doesn't really set you up, but Fort William National does set you up for Fort William.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, these are the things we're just trying to get into our heads, I think.
I got another question. You ready?
I'm ready.
We just launched a fantasy league, I would like to hear Alan's top 3
crikey.
Men and top 2 women fantasy picks for 2024.
And then we're going to make you an account and put you on there. Is it allowed to be...
Can't all be hitters.
Can it all be...
There's got to be some underdogs, because the goal of fantasy is obviously you get lesser riders because you think they're going to score higher throughout the season.
He's got horses really in the race.
I've
This is
got
the
him-
problem.
yeah.
This
It's
is
a difficult
in the
one.
race.
It's
Yeah.
really hard to. That's a really hard one to answer because, like you've seen, Ronan on fire at hardline could well do the same at Fort William.
Yeah.
You know, why not? Charlie, world champion on that track. Why not? Greg's won on that track. Why not? So there's a lot of obvious ones.
That's 3.
Yeah,
You can have
okay.
more.
So you're taking that one.
very expensive 3.
Yeah, 5-3.
Who am I thinking about? That's a really good question. I might have to come back to the men because I'd like to think of a rider. Like, for example, I'd love Taylor Vernon to show everyone he's deserving of a factory ride because that boy has done so much and done so well, sort of under the radar for so long. And he's such a good rider that he's one of those ones that I'd love to see that, and he's deserving of that. And sometimes my fear for where the sport is going is a rider like that might just get flushed out the back.
Yeah,
Yeah,
You know,
great one.
That's quite
Taylor
difficult.
Vernon, great fantasy pick.
So TV, and with the girls, I'm really excited for Gracie because I don't think she's shown what she can do. Although she's a big name rider, I don't think we've got to that point. The girls is a really interesting one because where they slimmed it down to 10 in the final, when you go through the riders that are there, there's more than 10 that are headline acts. When, you know, when Tane's not making a final, you're like, well, this isn't right.
Yeah.
You know, it needs to include these riders. So I do think that should change. And some of the juniors coming up, like Erise Van Leuven, she's awesome to watch. Like one of my favourite riders to watch on track. And I might be wrong that she might be a junior again this year.
Okay.
I think she's a junior again this year. But I'd love to see her times getting up there with... I think Valley's probably going to be the strongest. I'd love to see Miriam come back because she's been off with injury.
Yeah.
And Shana Hearn, I think she's a underdog because she was 0.7 of a second behind Nina at Threadbow, and Threadbow's 5.5 minutes long. That's a legit track, and to be, if you're that close on that length of track, that says a lot.
Yeah.
So I think there's some names for you.
Yeah, there is.
I hope that's answered it in a political.
Nah, it's good. It's like horse tips, isn't it?
That's
I'm going to
exactly what
create
it
my
is.
Yeah.
account and I might just sort of slide some of those in there.
should.
Like it. Thank you.
should.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
We got listener questions.
I think we got a few. Yeah, I think we got a few.
Should we do listener questions?
Quick fire listener questions.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm braced.
Okay, quick fire listener questions.
Can I just say before you ask the listener questions that after you put yours out, I put mine out,
Oh,
and barely none of the questions that I were asked I can actually answer on air because they're all rude and they're all
What's the-
taking the mick out of me.
Shame, dude. Shame.
oh dear.
I can't find it, Davey. Do you have to
I
go
think
on?
it's because we've expired.
there you
24
go. Okay.
hours.
Yeah, we're all right.
But if you scroll down,
Yeah, we'll be all
I've
right.
got some if you want some.
I've got them all.
Okay. Do you want to
Heavy
go first?
squat replacements for knee issues from Slipper.
I go glute bridge raise, or hip bridge. Yeah, lie the barbell on your stomach and
Nice, solid.
lift her up. Should take the pressure off the knee quite nicely.
There you go. Answer. Boom.
That's good. Sorry, there's some of the. I think we got some of the same ones.
Oh, really?
Harry Hodgson.
Hodgson, 67. Damn you, Harry.
Oh, dear.
Just be nice.
At Danny Hart 1.
Oh, really? Really?
Yeah, crave a Mars bar and a Coke mid-bonk on a road ride.
Did I not tell you about that? Cheeky bastard. There's a story behind that.
Okay. Or 10 timed laps of Val di Sole post World Cup finals.
Oh, that's a brilliant question. So, can I tell you the story behind that?
Please.
Mars bar and
Please.
a Coke. So I've been really ill before Christmas, and I'd not been on a bike for ages.
Oh, this wasn't on air either.
Yeah, this wasn't on
yeah,
air.
Yeah.
So, and I'd not ridden a road bike for a while, and Danny was coming down, and basically I was really naive. And I thought, you know what, it's only a steady road ride, I'll be absolutely fine. And I borrowed a road bike off a mate, and I hadn't done any exercise, and I thought I'll be absolutely fine. Anyway, went on a road ride with Danny, and he just tore my legs off. And it was really humbling. And it was I had to stop at a little village shop and get a
Bad
Coke.
feeling,
Yeah,
that,
really
isn't it?
bad.
Yeah.
I was struggling early. And Danny knew, and again, being that alpha competitive, he was like, you know what, I want to just go harder. Yeah, I'll just stop. So I bonked hard. And the funny thing was when I came home, I remember sitting down in the kitchen. I was really fed up with myself. I was like, this ain't good enough. And I remember saying to my wife, this is like a pretty telling moment, because either you don't worry about your training and you just be the coach.
Yeah, stop trying to go on the bike with the
Stop trying to keep
Come
up.
on.
Because Sue, my wife would often say that. She'd be like, why are you trying to lift the same? Why are you doing this? But then the other side was like, look, if you aren't willing to look after yourself and do the work, you've got no business trying to be on the same ride as him. So it taught me a good lesson. And I think I probably would go through it again in answer to this question, because Val de Sol after race runs is a dangerous place.
Good answer, that is. That's good.
That's great.
Oh, good on Danny.
Yeah, we got one from Marcus Holmes. What do you think is the most overlooked part of training?
Cardio. I think that people are quite happy to... I think steady state cardio. I'm not all about steady state cardio, but I can promise you if all you do is something super short and super hard, you'll hit a ceiling very quickly and you'll never be able to repeat it enough if you haven't developed this sort of aerobic system. So don't underestimate the ability to go out for a 90-minute, 2-hour cycle ride. If you can't do that, you're going to struggle with other areas quite quickly, I think.
Nice.
Yeah.
We got one from DMLITT. I think we've answered this, but we'll do it anyway. 5 things the average rider can do in the gym to make an improvement on the bike.
It's good. Good question.
Good
It's
question.
5 rather than 3.
Okay.
It's probably a bit more detail. Maybe you could add 2 onto
So
the
maybe
3 that we...
yeah, okay. So in the gym, like to recap, we looked at mobility, which I think is often overlooked. We looked at actually pedaling a bicycle, I think is often overlooked. And we looked at actually lifting some load. I think people can dance around without lifting load. The other thing, when he talks about overlooked, I think one thing that's overlooked is doing the same thing again and again and again and again.
Okay.
I think a lot of people get bored quickly and want to change up exercises and want to change program and want to change this and change that. But you're not going to progress that well doing that. You're going to confuse yourself quite a lot and your body's going to adapt to each thing. But for sustained improvement, I don't have that many variables. And so I think that's probably number 4. And number 5 is don't forget to train the muscles that you can't see in the mirror. Because a lot of the time people get very strong at the chest, they get strong in the abs and they get strong in the quads. And then they forget about calves, hamstrings, lower back, shoulder health, for example. And that it's sort of a coaching cliche, but quite often people will overlook the stuff they can't see in the mirror.
Okay.
So,
And I guess that's like compound lifts are good for that kind of...
compound lifts are mega. I would always try and learn a compound lift as opposed to isolating something down, unless I know the individual and they've got a specific problem. I think moving well is mega. Moving well under load and not trying to do a million reps of something. If it looks ugly, it's probably not helping you.
Yeah. That's been
Nice,
fantastic. Speaking of moving well, this worst segue. Move those fingers to the like button.
Oh, nice.
Move
dude,
your
nice.
phone over to follow at Alan Milway.
Yeah. If you
Is
want
just
to do
Alan
that,
Milway?
just Alan Milway.
Yeah.
If you want
Move
to do
your
that.
fingers to leaving a comment.
Yeah, leave a comment. Yeah.
We'll move on to the next episode.
Brilliant.
Next week.
Thanks for joining us, dude.
Oh, it's been a
really
pleasure. I've really
appreciate
enjoyed
that.
it.
Thank you,
Wicked,
mate.
yeah.
Thank you, boys.
Hey, man, what an episode that was. You did amazing in it.
And so did you.
You shone like a star.
You shone like a moon.
I shone like a focus spring deal.
Oh,
Yeah, that's
beautiful
good.
transition.
Right, I've got a question for you, David, to kick this final advert off.
yeah.
What would you do with up to 400 euros
Yeah.
if you got it back when buying a bike?
Ooh, I could stay in the bike shop and spend my 400 euros on accessories.
Good point. Support your local bike shop. Great point.
I could take the 400 euros and go to another shop close by, maybe buy 400 euros of pasta, maybe go to the Euro
Fuels your
store,
ride.
get 400 euros and just, that's Christmas done for eternity. Just
True.
keep handing them out every
Lottery
year.
tickets,
Yeah, beans,
tyres,
a
chamois cream,
new pet.
a new pet, perhaps a water dragon or an iguana. Lovely idea. Well, Focus are actually making that question a reality.
Nice.
Because with the Focus Spring deals, you can grab up to 400 euros back when buying a new bike. If you want to find out more, check out the terms and conditions and all of the details in the link. We're going to put that below, and I'm also going to read it out.
Please.
Okay, you ready for me to read it out?
Yes, I'm.
This is old school, innit? Reading out links.
Yeah, anticipation.
I'm going to do
time.
it anyway.
Please do
I'm
it.
doing it.
I want the deal.
ride.focus.bikes/spring deals TRC.
Ooh, nice. So that is ride.focus.bikes/spring deals TRC. And let us know in the comments what you would do with €400. Best answer wins a signed ODub hat.
Oh, I like it. Good.
All
I've
right.
got hats. Yeah, I'm ready. Yeah, I'm good
Okay,
for that.
okay.
Hey, can we also put something up here that you can click on for the next episode?
How about we put a subscribe up there in the middle?
Yeah, love
We're going to put a video we think that our lovely companionship will love on your face.
On my face?
Yeah. And
So
on
they can't see me now?
Gone. And on my face, another video that we think people will love. And thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Please hit like and subscribe. You guys are the best.
Peace and love.